Story 1. The weight that wasn't there. The load readout on my dashboard said 42,000 pounds, but the trailer felt empty. I'd been hauling freight for Marcus Webb Transport for 11 years, and you develop a sixth sense for weight distribution. How the rig handles curves, how the brakes respond, the way the whole vehicle settles into highway speed. This trailer handled like I was pulling air, yet every weigh station I'd passed in the last 300 miles confirmed the number. 42,000 pounds of something that had no mass. The manifest said, industrial equipment from a warehouse outside Duluth, Minnesota, destination Portland, Oregon. I'd picked it up at 2 in the morning on April 3rd, 2024. From a facility with no signs, no loading dock workers, just an automated gate that opened when I entered the pickup code. The trailer was already loaded, sealed, and waiting. The only person I saw was a man in a suit who handed me the paperwork through my window, his fingers cold enough to leave frost on the clipboard. He smiled with too many teeth and told me not to open the trailer under any circumstances. Standard enough warning for secured cargo, except for the way he said it. Not as a company policy, but as a survival instruction. I took I-94 west through North Dakota, and that's when the wrongness started. Not with the weight, I'd noticed that immediately, but with the distances. I filled up at a truck stop in Jamestown, noted the odometer reading 287,431 miles. The next town, Dickinson, should have been 166 miles away. I drove for what felt like the right amount of time, maybe 2.5 hours, watched the mile markers tick past, counted them to stay alert. But when I reached Dickinson, my odometer read 287,438. 7 miles. I'd driven 7 miles in 2.5 hours, yet I'd seen 166 mile markers pass. The sun set wrong that evening. It didn't sink gradually toward the horizon. It stuttered, dropping in increments like a badly skipping video, each jump leaving a brief afterimage. Between the jumps, maybe 3 or 4 seconds of normal sunset, then another disorienting lurch downward. I pulled over at a rest area, my hands shaking on the wheel, and sat there as darkness consumed the sky in those horrible stuttering gulps. Other trucks pulled in. Drivers got out to stretch, used the facilities, got back in their cabs. None of them seemed to notice. None of them looked at the sky with the terror that was closing around my throat like cold hands. I called my dispatcher, got voicemail, called my wife Sarah, got a connection, but only static answered. Static that occasionally formed patterns almost like words in a language I didn't know. I tried the CB radio. Channel 19 was dead silent, but on Channel 9 I picked up a voice. My voice. Having a conversation with another driver about a route through Wyoming, discussing a restaurant in Laramie I'd been to 6 years ago, laughing about a joke I'd told the waitress. I wasn't transmitting. I was listening to myself from the past or the future or some timeline adjacent to this one. The conversation bleeding through the frequencies like radio ghosts. I got back on the road because staying still felt worse. The highway stretched ahead, illuminated by my headlights, and the white dashes of the lane markers began to elongate. Not gradually, but I'd blink and they'd be longer, blink again and they'd stretched from the standard 10-foot lines to 20 feet, then 50, then continuous white strips that went on for hundreds of yards before a gap. The gaps got smaller. Eventually, I was driving between solid white walls, the lane markers having merged into unbroken lines that rose up like barriers on either side of my truck, hemming me in, growing taller with each mile until they were 6 feet high, then 8, then 12. The trailer still felt empty. But through the mirrors, I could see it swaying. Not from wind or road conditions, but swaying like something inside was moving. Something that weighed 42,000 pounds but exerted no force on the fifth wheel coupling, no drag on my cab. Something that existed in weight but not in mass, in measurement but not in physics. I reached for my logbook to ground myself in something concrete, something routine. I'd logged my pickup time, my departure from Duluth, my fuel stop in Jamestown. But below my last entry in my handwriting but in ink I didn't recognize, dark red, almost brown, were additional entries I hadn't written. They documented stops I hadn't made at towns that didn't exist. Merrick, North Dakota. Population 0. Arrival time 23:47. Departure time 23:47. Fuel 0 gallons. Distance traveled -33 miles. The white barriers on either side of me were now 15 feet tall, and I could see that they weren't painted lines anymore. They were made of something else, something that looked like compacted bone, smooth and ivory-colored, and they were curving inward at the top, slowly forming a tunnel. The stars disappeared. The moon disappeared. I was driving through a tube of bone that my lane markers had become, and my speedometer said 65 miles per hour. But the sensation was of falling, not forward motion, falling through space that had no concept of direction. My GPS showed my location updating, but the map beneath the blue dot was wrong. The roads didn't follow the right patterns. They curved in spirals, intersected themselves, formed geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. I watched my blue dot travel in a perfect figure-8 pattern while the road ahead of me remained straight. The GPS helpfully informed me I would reach my destination in -7 hours. That's when I felt the trailer move, not sway, move. It lurched forward, pushing my cab, though that should be impossible. The trailer doesn't push, it follows. But I felt it surge, felt the cab compress slightly from the impact of 42,000 pounds that wasn't supposed to be able to push forward, and the bone tunnel around me cracked. Not collapsed, cracked, like something on the inside of my trailer had struck the outside of reality. I slammed the brakes, the trailer jackknifed, and as it swung around I saw through my passenger window what was inside through a split in the aluminum siding. It wasn't industrial equipment. It was a space, a vast space, larger than the trailer's exterior dimensions, a cathedral of darkness that went down and down and down, and at the bottom, impossibly far away yet perfectly visible, were lights. Not electric lights, lights that moved with purpose, lights that were rising up toward the opening, ascending through that impossible interior space. And they were attached to something. They were the eyes of something, hundreds of eyes on something that was climbing up toward the crack in my trailer's side. The bone tunnel shattered. The pieces didn't fall. They evaporated, became white powder that the wind dispersed instantly, and I was on a normal highway again, pulled over on the shoulder, my hazards on, my trailer at a 45-degree angle behind me. Cars passed normally. The sky was dawn bright, though it had been midnight. My odometer read 287,789. I'd traveled 358 miles, which would put me well into Montana, but the road sign visible ahead said Jamestown, 8 miles. I was 8 miles from where I'd fueled up, where this had all begun. My phone rang. The caller ID said Marcus Webb Transport. I answered. The voice on the other end was mine, but older, strained, exhausted beyond measure. "Don't deliver the load," it said. "I delivered the load in 2031. It's been trying to prevent itself from being delivered ever since, sending the cargo back through time, trying to find a driver who won't complete the route. You have to refuse. You have to open the trailer and let it out here now before it reaches Portland." What happens if it reaches Portland? I asked my own voice from 7 years in the future. "Portland opens," the voice said, and the connection died. I sat in the cab, engine running, looking at the trailer in my mirrors. The crack in the side had sealed itself. The manifest on my passenger seat now listed the cargo as Embryonic Urban Center Class 7 Metropolitan Seed Forbidden Growth Category. The delivery address in Portland was for a location that my GPS couldn't find, coordinates that placed it 300 feet below the city. I could refuse the delivery, I could open the trailer. But the seal on the doors was no longer a simple plastic tag with a serial number. It was organic, pulsing slightly, grown into the metal, and I knew with absolute certainty that opening those doors wouldn't release the cargo. Would release me into the cargo, into that vast descending space with the rising lights. So I drove. I recoupled the trailer, pulled back onto the highway, and drove west. The distances stayed normal. The sun moved correctly. The weight of the trailer remained exactly 42,000 pounds on the readouts while feeling like nothing at all. I passed through Montana, Idaho, into Oregon, and with each mile I could feel Portland ahead of me. Feel it waiting. Feel it ready to receive what I was bringing. To open in ways cities shouldn't open. To become what was inside the trailer. Not a city anymore, but a space. A vast interior. A place that went down forever. I arrived on April 9th, 2024, at the coordinates on the manifest. There was nothing there, just an empty lot in an industrial area. I backed the trailer into position, uncoupled it as instructed, and drove away. In my mirror, I watched the trailer sink into the ground like it was being swallowed, watched the earth close over it seamlessly, watched the lot become empty again. That was 6 months ago. Portland is still there on maps, still has its population, still functions. But I've heard reports, rumors among other drivers that the city's gotten bigger. Not in population or sprawl, but in interior space. Buildings that are larger inside than outside. Streets that extend farther than they should. A downtown that takes longer to drive through than the mileage indicates. Portland is opening, becoming that vast internal space, and eventually the exterior will catch up to the interior, and the city will reveal what it's been becoming. I don't haul freight anymore. I can't, because 3 times since that delivery I've received calls from dispatch for another pickup in Duluth, same facility, same cargo. I've refused each time, but the calls keep coming, and the pickup date keeps getting earlier. The last call was for a pickup on April the 2nd, 2024, the day before I picked up the original load. Whatever's in Portland is trying to ensure it gets delivered by reaching backward, creating redundant timelines, and I don't know how many other versions of me are on the road right now, all carrying the same cargo, all heading west, all feeding Portland's transformation. I see trucks sometimes that look like mine, same make and model, and when they pass, I glimpse the driver's face. It's always mine, and it's always screaming. Story 2. The Passenger Manifest. Rebecca Kwan noticed the passenger when she stopped for coffee at the Flying J in Elk City, Oklahoma, 3:17 a.m., September 22, 2023. She'd been driving solo from Dallas to Albuquerque with a load of electronics, a routine run she'd made 40-something times, and her cab had been empty when she parked. When she climbed back in with her coffee, there was a woman in the passenger seat, mid-30s, blonde, wearing a blue dress that looked like it was from the 1950s, and she was reading a newspaper. Not looking at her phone, not scrolling, reading an actual physical newspaper, the paper crackling as she turned the pages. "The fuck are you doing in my truck?" Rebecca said, her hand already on her phone to call the police. The woman looked up, smiled pleasantly, and said, "Hitching to Albuquerque. You're going to Albuquerque, I checked your manifest." "I don't pick up hitchhikers, get out." "I can't," the woman said, and she sounded genuinely apologetic. "I'm already on the passenger manifest, see?" She held up a piece of paper, and Rebecca's blood went cold because it was her manifest, the one that had been locked in the glove compartment, and there was a second line item below her cargo listing. Passenger Eleanor Voss. Origin mile marker 34, I-40 West. Destination, Albuquerque, NM. Status, in transit. Rebecca grabbed the paper. It was her manifest, same barcode, same dispatch stamp. But the passenger line had always been there. The ink was the same age as the rest of the document, not freshly added. And she remembered now, with a sickening lurch in her memory, that dispatch had mentioned a passenger. Had told her to pick up Eleanor Voss at mile marker 34, even though Rebecca had never picked up passengers, wasn't authorized to transport people, and mile marker 34 was 200 miles behind her current location. "I picked you up already," Rebecca said slowly. "Didn't I?" Eleanor nodded. 217 miles ago. We've been having a lovely conversation. You told me about your daughter, Jennifer, how she's studying biochemistry at Northwestern. You showed me pictures. Rebecca didn't have a daughter. She'd never wanted children, but her phone, when she checked the photo gallery with trembling hands, was full of pictures of a young woman she'd never met. A girl with Rebecca's eyes and a stranger's smile, images from graduation, from holidays, from a life Rebecca hadn't lived. Captions she didn't remember writing. "Jenny's first day at Northwestern. So proud of my girl." The dates went back 21 years. Eleanor kept reading her newspaper, and Rebecca could see the date on the masthead. September 22nd, 1952. 71 years old. The headlines were about Eisenhower, about the Korean War, and the paper looked fresh. Ink not yellowed, pages crisp. Rebecca started driving because stopping felt like surrender. I-40 West stretched ahead, empty at this hour, her headlights cutting through darkness that seemed thicker than normal, more resistant to light. Eleanor hummed quietly a tune Rebecca almost recognized, something that made her think of her childhood. Except her childhood had been in Los Angeles in the 1990s, and this song felt older. Felt like it came from a time before she was born, before her parents were born. "What are you?" Rebecca asked. "A passenger," Eleanor said. "You agreed to take me. It's on the manifest." "I didn't agree to anything." "Not yet," Eleanor said, and turned another page of her newspaper. The mile markers were counting up normally, 203, 204, 205, but Rebecca noticed that she was passing the same rest area billboard 3 times, the same advertisement for a truck stop in Amarillo, and Eleanor was getting clearer, more solid. When she'd first appeared, there'd been a translucence to her, a slight shimmer like heat haze, but with each mile she became more real, more present, more there in a way that pushed against the space, made the cab feel smaller. Rebecca's CB radio crackled. A voice came through, her voice saying, "Dispatch, this is Quan. I'm at mile marker 207. I have an unauthorized passenger. I need—" And then static, then screaming, then silence. "That was you," Eleanor said conversationally. 47 miles from now. You're going to try to call for help. It won't work." "Why not?" "Because you're not going to want help anymore. You're going to understand by then." Rebecca's hands were slick on the wheel. The highway was wrong now, subtly wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. The lanes were the right width. The road surface looked normal, but the geometry was off, angles not quite matching. The curve of the earth too pronounced, like she was driving on the inside of a sphere instead of across a flat plane. The horizon curved upward at the edges of her vision. Her phone rang. She answered without thinking. "Mom," a voice said, a young woman's voice, frightened. "Mom, where are you? You were supposed to pick me up from the lab 3 hours ago. I've been calling and calling." "Who is this?" Rebecca demanded. "It's Jenny." "Mom, are you okay? You sound weird." "I don't have a daughter." Silence on the line, long and terrible. Then, "Mom, please, this isn't funny. I'm scared. There's something wrong with the campus. They're forgetting. Professor Chen didn't recognize me today. The registrar has no record of my enrollment. Mom, I'm disappearing, and you're the only one who still remembers me. Please, you have to stay focused. You have to keep remembering, or I'll—" The call cut off. Rebecca looked at Eleanor, who had set down her newspaper and was watching her with something like sympathy. "She's not real," Rebecca said. "She's as real as you keep her," Eleanor replied. Right now, you're holding two timelines in your head. The one where you had Jennifer and the one where you didn't. Most people can't do that. Most people collapse into one timeline or the other, but you're holding both, which means you're almost at the border. What border? Between the road you're on and the road you were supposed to be on. Mile marker 247. Rebecca's head was splitting, a migraine building behind her eyes, and she was remembering two different lives simultaneously. The life where she'd met David in college, married him, had Jennifer, got divorced, raised her daughter alone, and the life she knew was real, where she'd never married, never had children, had driven trucks for 15 years and been content with the solitude. Both memories were equally vivid, equally detailed, and they were tearing her apart, trying to coexist. Eleanor was fully solid now, fully present, and Rebecca could smell her perfume, something floral and antique. The woman reached over and touched Rebecca's arm, and her fingers were real, warm, alive. "I'm you," Eleanor said. 71 years ago, I made a choice. I took a route that didn't exist yet, a road that was still being decided. I drove into the space between possibilities, and I've been here ever since, hitching rides with other drivers, trying to find my way back to a definite timeline. Every trucker who picks me up has to choose which version of their life to keep, because the road between possibilities can only support one reality per person. That's insane. Yes, Eleanor agreed. But you're here, so it's also true. The highway split ahead. Not a normal exit or interchange, but a literal bifurcation. The road dividing into two highways that existed in the same space, overlapping, one slightly offset from the other like a double exposure photograph. Rebecca could see both routes simultaneously, one that continued west on I-40 into Albuquerque, familiar and normal, and one that curved into darkness, into a direction that wasn't west or any cardinal direction, a road that went somewhere perpendicular to geography. "Left route, you keep Jennifer," Eleanor said. "You've had a daughter for 21 years, and that life becomes real, becomes the only timeline that ever existed. You'll arrive in Albuquerque, deliver your load, call your daughter, and you'll never remember that you once didn't have her. And the right route? You keep your actual life. No daughter, no husband, just you and the road. But you'll remember that somewhere, in another timeline, Jennifer is disappearing because you chose not to make her real." Rebecca's phone was ringing again, Jennifer calling back, desperate. Her photo gallery was full of a girl she'd never met but could remember raising, remember loving. She could remember teaching Jennifer to ride a bike, remember her first day of school, remember the fights during her teenage years, remember the pride at her graduation. 21 years of memories that hadn't happened but felt more vivid than her actual past. The split in the road was 50 yards ahead, 40 yards, 30. "What happens to you?" Rebecca asked Eleanor. "If you choose definitively, I cease existing in your timeline. I'll still be hitching on the border road, but you won't remember picking me up. You'll just have always been on whichever route you choose." 20 yards. Rebecca could see details on both highways now. The left route had mile markers that continued the sequence, had rest areas she recognized from previous trips. The right route had markers that weren't numbers, that were symbols she didn't understand. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. Her phone rang again. This time, when she answered, it wasn't Jennifer. It was her own voice, older, exhausted. "Don't choose. Stay on the border. Eleanor's been recruiting. There are 17 of us now driving the road between possibilities, and we're building something. A new route. A highway that exists in all timelines simultaneously. But we need more drivers. We need you to not choose, to keep both lives active, to stay in the split." 10 yards. Eleanor was smiling, and Rebecca realized the woman was younger now, changing. Becoming Rebecca's age, becoming Rebecca's face. "The border road isn't hell. Rebecca said. It's potential. It's every route you could ever drive, every life you could ever live, all existing at once. But you have to give up certainty. You have to drive forever in the space between choices. 5 yards. Rebecca saw other trucks on the border route now, dozens of them all driving the perpendicular highway. And through their windshields, she glimpsed the drivers, and they all looked like her, or like Eleanor, or like something in between. People who'd chosen not to choose, who'd stayed in the quantum space between definite realities. Her hands turned the wheel. She felt herself making a choice, felt reality beginning to collapse into one timeline or the other, felt Jennifer either becoming real or ceasing to have ever existed. The truck entered the split. For a moment, Rebecca was on both highways simultaneously, her truck occupying 2 spaces, and the sensation was of being torn apart and compressed together at the same time, every atom of her body existing in 2 states. She screamed, or didn't scream, or did both, and Eleanor, not Eleanor, reached over and grabbed the wheel, helping her hold the line, keeping the truck in the exact center of the split where both routes overlapped. "Hold steady," Eleanor said. "Just a little further. The border stabilizes after the first mile." Rebecca held. Her truck was driving on a road that was 2 roads, in a space that was 2 spaces, and she could see her life branching in both directions. On her left, through the driver's window, she could see herself arriving in Albuquerque, calling Jennifer, having dinner with her daughter that evening. On her right, through the passenger window, she could see herself arriving alone, delivering the cargo, calling her dispatcher for the next route. No daughter, no other life. Both versions were real. Both versions were her. And she was neither or both or something in between, driving the border road where Eleanor had been driving for 71 years. "How long do I have to stay here?" Rebecca asked. Rebecca smiled. "Until you find another driver to take your place. Until you can convince someone else to not choose, to stay in the split. Then you can collapse into whichever timeline you want." "How many drivers have you recruited?" "You're the 14th. We need 100. When we reach 100, the border road becomes permanent, becomes a real highway that anyone can access. We're building an alternate America, a road system that exists between choices, and everyone who drives it will have access to all their possible lives simultaneously." Mile marker 1 border. The road had stabilized. Rebecca was driving on a highway that existed perpendicular to reality, and in her mirrors she could see the other trucks, the other drivers who'd chosen not to choose, all of them driving in formation, building the impossible route with each mile they traveled. Her phone showed 2 signal bars. She had Jennifer's number in her contacts and her own number, the version of herself that had chosen the other route. She could call either of them, could hear her daughter's voice or her own voice, could touch base with the timelines she'd left behind. She didn't call. She drove. The border road stretched ahead, and she could see it branching further, splitting into more routes, more choices, more possibilities. She could drive to Albuquerque or Seattle or Miami or 50 other cities simultaneously. She could deliver electronics or furniture or livestock or quantum states. She could be Rebecca Kwan, the childless trucker, or Rebecca Voss, the mother, or Rebecca Chen, who'd married someone else entirely, or 17 other versions, and on the border road she was all of them. Eleanor dissolved into the passenger seat, her job done, and Rebecca drove alone but not alone, her truck one of 14 building the highway between possibilities, and she knew she'd drive this route forever, or until she found another driver willing to not choose, willing to stay in the split, willing to help build the impossible road. She passes other trucks sometimes, normal trucks on normal highways, and she can see the drivers making choices, choosing routes, collapsing into single timelines. She wants to warn them that choice is a trap, that certainty is a prison, that the border road offers everything at the cost of committing to nothing. But she doesn't. She just drives. And sometimes on lonely stretches of highway in the hour before dawn, other truckers see her rig in their mirrors, appearing and disappearing, existing and not existing, and they hear on their CB radios an offer, a question, a possibility. I'm heading everywhere. Want a ride? Most of them choose not to answer. They collapse into single timelines, definite routes, certain destinations, but some of them answer, and the border road grows longer. Story 3. The inspection that never ends. Thomas Reeves was 3 questions into the dot inspection when he realized the inspector had no face. Not a blank face, not a masked face. The man had a head, had a uniform with a Department of Transportation badge, had a clipboard and a pen. But the area where his face should be was a smooth surface, like unrendered space, like God had forgotten to add the details. Thomas had already answered 2 questions, license and registration, cargo manifest, before his brain processed what his eyes were seeing, and by then the faceless inspector was walking around his truck with that clipboard, checking tire pressure, examining the coupling, and Thomas was standing by the cab on a remote way station somewhere in western Kansas. I-70 West, November 11th, 2023, 4:32 p.m. And he couldn't remember pulling in. He'd been driving. Then he was here. No memory of seeing the way station sign. No memory of slowing down. No memory of pulling onto the scale. Just a gap, a missing minute or 5 minutes or however long it took to leave the highway and stop. And the faceless inspector was saying, not with a mouth because he didn't have one, but the words appeared directly in Thomas's mind. Vehicle inspection required. Please remain by your truck. Other trucks were here, 7 or 8 of them, all parked in designated spots around the way station, and all their drivers were standing by their vehicles, and they all had the same expression. Confusion, fear, the look of people trying to figure out when they'd agreed to stop here. The way station itself was wrong. Too large, too many buildings, structures that served no clear purpose, concrete towers with no doors, metal frameworks supporting nothing, and in the center a scale that was bigger than any scale Thomas had ever seen, large enough to weigh 50 trucks simultaneously. The faceless inspector moved with mechanical precision, checking items on his clipboard, his pen making marks that Thomas could hear. Scratch, 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 even though he was 30 feet away. The sound was too loud, invasive, like it was scratching directly on Thomas's eardrums. "Sir," Thomas called out. "Sir, I don't remember pulling in here. I need to get back on the road." The inspector stopped, turned, and though he had no face, Thomas felt himself being looked at, examined, assessed. "Inspection in progress," the words appeared in his mind. "Estimated completion time, 73 hours. 73 hours? That's 3 days. I have a delivery deadline. All vehicles must pass inspection before proceeding." Thomas looked at the other drivers. One of them, a woman in her 50s with Morrison Freight on her jacket, caught his eye and shook her head slightly, a warning gesture. She'd been here longer than him. Thomas could tell by the way she was standing, the resigned slump of her shoulders, the look of someone who'd already tried arguing and failed. The faceless inspector continued around Thomas's truck, and now he was doing things that made no sense. He opened the driver's door and measured the interior dimensions, writing down numbers. He inspected the air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, removed it, placed it in a plastic evidence bag, sealed it. He checked the tread depth on the tires, but his measuring tool went through the rubber, penetrated into the tire deeper and deeper until Thomas heard it scraping against the pavement beneath. "Hey, you're damaging my equipment," Thomas protested. The inspector ignored him. He moved to the trailer, applied a seal-breaking tool to the lock, and opened the cargo doors. Thomas was hauling furniture, 43,000 pounds of office chairs and desks. The inspector climbed inside the trailer, and Thomas heard the man moving around in there, heard furniture being shifted, heard the metallic clicks of a tape measure extending. Then he heard something else. Drilling. The inspector was drilling into something in there, a high-pitched whine of a power drill going through metal, then through wood, then through something that sounded organic, wet, and the drilling sound turned into a squelching sound. And Thomas smelled something terrible wafting out of the trailer. Something like rotten eggs and burning hair, and underneath that something sweet and cloying like decay. The inspector emerged. He was covered in black fluid, his uniform soaked, the clipboard dripping. Inspection failed, the words appeared. Organic contamination detected. Vehicle must be quarantined. What? There's no organic anything in there, it's furniture. But the inspector was walking toward one of the structures, and Thomas made the mistake of looking into his trailer. The furniture was gone. In its place was flesh. Not packaged flesh, not meat, but living flesh, walls of it pulsing, veined, growing up the interior sides of the trailer like some kind of cancer. And in the center something was forming. Something with too many limbs, something that turned what might have been a head toward Thomas, and opened what might have been a mouth and screamed with a sound that was just air being forced through wet tissue. Thomas backed away, stumbled, fell. The other drivers were watching him with expressions that said they'd seen similar things in their own trailers, that they'd been through this. The Morrison freight woman helped him up. "Don't look in your trailer again," she said quietly. "It gets worse every time you look. The inspection finds things that weren't there before. The longer you're here, the more violations it discovers, and the more violations, the more they transform what you're carrying into evidence of the violations. It's a feedback loop." "How long have you been here?" Thomas asked. "I pulled in at 9 a.m. It's been... How long has it been?" She checked her phone. "It says 4:45 p.m., so 7 hours and 45 minutes, but it doesn't feel like 7 hours. Feels like days." Thomas checked his own phone. 4:39 p.m. He'd been here 7 minutes, but it felt longer. And when he tried to remember details from those 7 minutes, where exactly he'd been standing, what the sky had looked like, whether other trucks had been here when he arrived, the memories were vague, dreamlike, already fading. The faceless inspector emerged from the building with equipment. Not normal inspection equipment. Medical equipment. Syringes. Tubes. Devices Thomas didn't recognize. Complex assemblies of metal and glass that hummed with electricity. He approached the Morrison freight woman's truck and gestured for her to follow. "What's he doing?" Thomas asked. But the woman was already walking toward her vehicle, her movements stiff, puppet-like, compelled. The inspector proceeded to extract fluid samples from her truck, not fuel or oil. He opened the driver's door and inserted a needle into the seat cushion, drew out liquid that looked like blood, labeled it, bagged it. He punctured the tires and collected samples of the air inside, air that came out as yellow vapor that hung in the atmosphere instead of dispersing. He opened the hood and took samples from the engine, but the samples he extracted were organic material, tissue samples, biopsies from a vehicle that had been metal and rubber but was apparently flesh beneath the surface. The woman stood and watched, tears running down her face as her truck was dissected, as the inspector documented violations. As the list of failures grew longer, Thomas could hear the pen scratching on the clipboard from 40 feet away. Scratch, 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 each mark a new problem, a new contamination, a new reason to fail the inspection. Time was wrong here. Thomas checked his phone obsessively. 4:41 p.m., 4:42 p.m. But between checks he experienced long stretches, hour-long feeling periods where he stood and waited and watched other drivers go through their inspections. Watched their vehicles be sampled and analyzed and progressively transformed into organic mockeries of trucks, metal turning to cartilage, glass turning to membranes, tires deflating into fleshy sacks. A new truck pulled in. No, not pulled in. Appeared. One moment the parking spot was empty, the next a Kenworth was sitting there, engine off, and the driver was standing beside it looking confused. The faceless inspector approached him immediately, clipboard ready. "How many of us are here?" Thomas asked the Morrison woman when she returned from her inspection, walking unsteadily. 37, I think, but that's not right. I can only see 8 trucks. But I remember 37 drivers. I remember talking to them. Where are they? Thomas looked around the way station. 8 trucks visible, including his. But in his peripheral vision, he caught glimpses of more vehicles, shadows of trucks that disappeared when he tried to look directly at them. Ghost vehicles in ghost parking spots, and he understood that the drivers had been here so long that they and their trucks had partially phased out of full visibility, had become semi-transparent, were fading. The Morrison woman grabbed his arm. "Listen to me. You're new here, so you still have weight, physical weight, presence. The longer you stay, the less substantial you become. After a while, you're just going through the inspection motions, but you're not really here anymore. You're in some archived version of this way station, stored somewhere, filed away. You have to fail the inspection faster than you pass it. What does that mean? The inspection is looking for violations. If it finds them too slowly, you stay here while it completes its process. But if you can make your vehicle so contaminated, so failed, that the inspection can't continue, that the inspector has to reject your truck entirely, then you get kicked out. Not allowed back on the road, but ejected from the way station. You end up somewhere else, somewhere wrong, but somewhere that isn't here." "Where?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I haven't had the courage to try, but some drivers have. They deliberately sabotage their vehicles, pour biological matter into their fuel tanks, smash their own gauges, corrupt their logbooks. And then they disappear, and the way station resets their parking spots and new drivers appear." The faceless inspector was calling Thomas over now, wordlessly, the command appearing directly in his mind. Thomas walked to his truck, and the inspector handed him a breathing mask and gloves, then opened the trailer doors again. The flesh inside had grown, had filled more of the space, and the thing forming in the center was larger, more defined. It had a face now, and the face was Thomas's face, and it was looking at him with eyes that were his eyes, and it spoke with his voice. "Help me finish growing. Help me become complete." The inspector's clipboard had 17 pages now, all documenting violations, all recording the ways Thomas's truck and cargo had failed inspection. The list was growing. Unauthorized biological cargo, vehicle-human hybrid contamination, temporal displacement of cargo materials, existential instability of driver identity, and dozens more Thomas didn't understand. He'd been here 7 minutes or 7 hours or 7 days. His phone said 4:51 p.m. The sun hadn't moved in the sky. The other drivers were watching him, and he could see which ones were older arrivals. They were translucent, faded, going through inspection motions with the repetitive movements of people who'd done this hundreds of times. The inspector produced a new device, something that looked like a camera but with too many lenses arranged in a spiral pattern. He photographed Thomas, and with each flash, Thomas felt something removed from him, felt himself becoming less defined, felt his memories of the life before the way station becoming vaguer. He tried to remember his wife's name. Karen. He tried to hold on to that. Karen. They'd been married 11 years. 11 years, Karen. The name was dissolving in his mind like sugar in water. The flesh. Thomas in the trailer was growing stronger as real Thomas was growing weaker. The inspector was documenting the identity transfer, writing it down, scratch, 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 and Thomas understood that the inspection wasn't finding violations. It was creating them, was transforming normal trucks and cargo and drivers into violations by the act of inspection itself, by the observation and documentation, quantum mechanics on a horrible scale. Thomas made a decision. He walked to his truck's fuel tank, unscrewed the cap, and urinated into it. Biological contamination. Direct, blatant, undeniable. The inspector's head snapped toward him. No face, but attention. Laser-focused. Thomas then grabbed a tire iron from his cab and smashed every gauge on his dashboard, glass shattering, needles breaking. Equipment destruction. He opened his logbook and scrawled obscenities across the pages, drew pentagrams, wrote "inspection failed" over and over. Document falsification. The other drivers were backing away. The Morrison woman was shaking her head, frightened. Thomas walked to his trailer, climbed inside with the flesh thing that was becoming him, and he embraced it. Hugged his own clone made of corrupted cargo, felt its skin merge with his skin, felt it trying to absorb him, to finish its formation by consuming the original. And he let it begin, felt himself being digested, and then he grabbed the inspector's evidence bags from where they sat by the trailer door and forced them into the flesh thing's mouth. Made it consume the documented violations, made it eat the evidence. The inspector appeared at the trailer door, and the scratching sound of his pen went silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the clipboard caught fire. Not normal fire, cold fire, black flames that consumed the paper but spread no heat. The inspector's uniform began to burn with the same flames, and the faceless head turned toward Thomas, and for the first time, words didn't appear in his mind. Instead, a sound emerged from where the mouth should be, a sound like tearing metal and screaming children in frequencies that made Thomas's nose bleed. The way station shook. The buildings cracked. The huge scale in the center split down the middle, and Thomas saw that beneath it was a pit, and in the pit were all the trucks and drivers who'd been fully absorbed by the inspection. Hundreds of them compressed into a space that shouldn't fit them. All still going through inspection procedures for eternity, and the faceless inspectors. There were many now, dozens of them emerging from the buildings, were all burning with black fire. Thomas felt himself being ejected, not physically thrown, but rejected by reality, pushed out of the way station by the universe, trying to correct the paradox he'd created by contaminating the inspection process itself. The flesh thing released him, unraveled back into furniture that was no longer furniture, and the trailer sealed itself, and Thomas was in his cab, and the engine was starting, and he was moving, driving through the way station's exit even though he wasn't pressing the accelerator. The way station receded in his mirrors, but it wasn't receding correctly. It was folding, collapsing inward, the buildings bending into geometrically impossible configurations. And the other trucks were escaping too, all of them being ejected simultaneously, all driving out onto roads that weren't I-70, weren't any interstate Thomas recognized. He ended up on a highway that was empty, that stretched through landscape that was flat and featureless and gray. No towns, no signs, no mile markers. His phone had no signal. His GPS showed him as a blue dot in an empty space labeled unclassified territory. He drove for hours or days, time meaningless here, until finally he saw another road intersecting this one, a normal-looking highway, and he took it, and suddenly he was on I-70 again in Kansas, and his phone showed November 11th, 4:33 p.m., 1 minute after he'd pulled into the way station. But his cargo was wrong. He checked the trailer. The furniture was back, looked normal. But when he touched a chair, it was warm, body temperature, and it contracted slightly under his fingers, a flinch. And he realized that everything in his trailer was alive in some minimal way, was flesh pretending to be furniture, and he was still hauling the thing he'd tried to escape. He delivered the cargo to Denver 3 days later. The receiving warehouse accepted it without comment. He never saw what they did with the furniture, what purpose it served, who it was for. But sometimes late at night in truck stop parking lots, he sees that way station in his dreams, still there, still inspecting, still transforming vehicles and drivers into violations. and he sees the Morrison woman still there, translucent now, almost invisible, still going through her inspection, and he knows that every time he passes a way station there's a chance he'll pull in and not be able to leave, that he'll join the permanent inspection, the one that never ends. He avoids way stations now, takes back roads, risks fines, risks his CDL. But sometimes his truck pulls into them anyway, steering itself, drawn by some residual contamination from that first inspection, and he sits in the cab with his hands off the wheel and prays he'll pass through without stopping, that the wait station won't recognize him as unfinished business. So far, he's been lucky. So far, the truck has passed through without stopping, engine rumbling, wheels turning, cargo warm and breathing softly in the trailer behind him. But one day, he knows, one day the truck will stop, and the faceless inspector will be waiting with his clipboard, and the inspection will resume. And this time, there will be no escape, no ejection, just the eternal documentation of violations that grow faster than they can be recorded, scratch, 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 forever. Story 4. The Convoy That Follows. Martin Delacroix saw the first truck appear in his mirrors at mile marker 167 on Highway 20 through Montana, January 8, 2024, 11:03 p.m., and his immediate thought was that he'd gained a tail, which was normal enough. Truckers often convoy informally for safety and company. The truck was a Peterbilt, older model, dark paint, no company markings, and it settled into position exactly 40 feet behind Martin's trailer, maintaining that distance with inhuman precision. When Martin accelerated, it accelerated. When he slowed, it slowed. 40 feet exactly, as measured by the lines on the road, never 39, never 41. By mile marker 184, 3 more trucks had joined. They appeared not from on-ramps or side roads, but from nothing, materializing in sequence behind the first truck, all maintaining 40-foot spacing, all dark and unmarked. 4 trucks following Martin now, a convoy he hadn't asked for and didn't want, driving through Montana night on empty highway with no other traffic visible in either direction. Martin tried the CB radio. Breaker 19, this is the Freightliner hauling west on Highway 20. Can the convoy behind me identify yourselves? Static. He tried again. More static. He switched channels, cycled through all 40, found nothing but empty hiss on every frequency. At mile marker 201, there were 7 trucks. At marker 218, 12. They appeared in his mirrors like multiplication, like cell division, the convoy growing behind him with mathematical regularity, and Martin realized they weren't following the road curve naturally. They were traveling in a perfectly straight line regardless of the highway's actual path, sometimes passing through the shoulder, sometimes cutting across the other lane, maintaining their rigid formation and their exact 40-foot spacing and their absolute fixation on Martin's vehicle. He tried to outrun them, pushed his Freightliner to 80, 85, 90 miles per hour, engine screaming, trailer swaying dangerously. The convoy matched his speed instantly. No acceleration period, just immediate velocity adjustment, 40 feet behind, and now Martin could see that they weren't touching the road. Their wheels were spinning, positioned at road level, but there was a gap, maybe an inch, maybe less, hard to tell in the mirror and darkness, but they were hovering, driving on nothing, and they cast no headlight beams. Their lights were on bright in the mirrors, but they illuminated nothing, produced no visible cones of light. Martin slammed his brakes. From 90 to 0 in a distance no loaded truck should manage. Physics violated by panic, and the convoy stopped with him instantly. No skidding, no momentum, just immediate cessation of movement. 40-foot spacing maintained. 17 trucks now. He counted them in his mirrors, counted twice to be sure. 17 trucks that hadn't been there when he'd started his shift 6 hours ago. That had accumulated around him like some kind of magnetic attraction, and as he sat there on the empty highway with his hazards on and his engine idling, another truck appeared. This one materialized directly in front of him, 40 feet ahead, the same dark, unmarked model, and it was facing backward, facing toward Martin, driver's position, oriented to stare directly at Martin's windshield, and Martin could see there was no driver. The cab was empty. Or the cab was full of something that wasn't shaped like a person. A dark mass that filled the space where a driver should be. He was boxed in now. Trucks ahead and behind, and when he checked his mirrors, trucks were flanking him too. Positioned in the other lane, surrounding him in a formation that moved with him when he rolled forward experimentally. That maintained the exact geometric relationship no matter what he did. His CB radio came to life, not with voices, with engine sounds. 18 different trucks' engines, all audible through the speaker, all idling at slightly different RPMs, and the combined sound formed a pattern, a rhythm, almost musical, almost like Morse code or binary, an information structure embedded in diesel rumble. Martin tried to translate it, tried to find meaning, but the pattern shifted faster than he could track, and underneath the engine sounds he heard air brakes, heard the hiss and release, heard it from all 18 trucks simultaneously, and the combined hiss formed words or parts of words, phonemes arranged into something that was almost language. Join, formation, complete, convoy, join, complete. He checked his fuel gauge, 3/4 full, enough for 500 miles, but the needle was dropping as he watched, sinking visibly, and the math didn't work. He was losing fuel at a rate that suggested he was burning not gallons per hour, but gallons per second, and the trucks surrounding him were getting closer, tightening the formation, 40 feet becoming 35, 35 becoming 30. And Martin understood that they were siphoning him somehow, draining his fuel through proximity, feeding on it. He grabbed his phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual in rural Montana, but when he opened his apps, they were wrong. His contacts list showed 18 entries, all labeled convoy unit followed by numbers. His photo gallery was full of pictures he'd never taken, shots of highways from perspectives. He'd never occupied aerial views of truck formations driving through landscapes that looked almost but not quite like Earth. The sky wrong colors, the sun too large, the roads too straight. The trucks were 25 feet away now, and Martin could see details he wished he couldn't. The trailers had no doors, no way to access the cargo space, just solid, unmarked surfaces. The license plates were wrong, not Montana plates, not any state he recognized, just sequences of numbers that were too long, that contained digits above 9. Symbols that weren't numbers at all. And the paint wasn't paint, it was something organic, something that rippled like skin. And Martin realized the trucks were breathing, the trailers expanding and contracting slightly. Synchronized respiration, 18 vehicles inhaling and exhaling together. 20 feet. Martin's fuel gauge hit empty and his engine sputtered, and his truck rolled to a stop and the convoy stopped with him. Formation perfect. Geometry maintained. The engine sounds on the CB radio grew louder, more insistent, and the pattern resolved into clarity, into actual words now. All 18 trucks speaking in unison. You are the 19th. You have been selected. Join the formation. Complete the convoy. Martin tried to restart his engine. Dead. Not just out of fuel, but dead in a way that felt permanent, felt like the engine had aged centuries and seconds, metal fatigued beyond function. A truck that had been 7 years old now corroded to archaeology. He grabbed his flashlight, opened his door, stepped down onto the highway. The air was wrong. Too thick, resistant, like moving through something denser than atmosphere. His breath came short and the temperature was impossible. His truck's external thermometer had read 23 degrees Fahrenheit, but the air felt body temperature, humid, organic. The convoy truck's doors opened. All 18 simultaneously, smooth mechanical precision, and no drivers emerged because there were no drivers, just the dark masses Martin had glimpsed. And now, in the illumination from his flashlight, he could see what they were. compressed space, folded dimensions. Each cab contained an interior that was larger than the exterior, impossibly large. Cathedral vast spaces folded into truck cab-sized containers, and inside those spaces were roads, highways, endless strips of asphalt going nowhere. And on those roads were more trucks, convoys within convoys, infinite recursion. One of the dark masses extended toward Martin. Not physically, it didn't leave the cab, but it reached through space in a way that ignored distance. And Martin felt it touch him, felt it analyzing him, measuring him, determining his compatibility with the formation. It felt like being X-rayed, being CT scanned, being seen through in every way, his body's composition assessed, his vehicle's specifications recorded, his driving history evaluated. Compatible, the CB radio said. Designation, Convoy Unit 19. Specialization, long-haul consciousness transfer, integration beginning. Martin ran. Dropped the flashlight, sprinted into the darkness away from the highway, into the Montana wilderness, into the scrub brush and rocks, and behind him he heard the trucks move. Not following, but repositioning, spreading out, forming a perimeter, and he realized they weren't going to chase him because they didn't need to. They could wait, had infinite patience, would stay here forever if necessary until he returned to the highway, because where else could he go? He was in the middle of Montana emptiness, 40 miles from the nearest town, no phone signal, no help. He ran for what felt like hours but was probably minutes, his breath coming in gasps, cold air burning his lungs, and when he looked back, the convoy was still visible. 18 pairs of headlights arranged in perfect geometric formation. Not following, just present, always in view regardless of how far he ran or what direction he chose. The trucks maintaining visual contact through impossible means. His legs gave out. He collapsed in the sagebrush, lay there staring at the stars. And the stars were wrong too. The constellations were scrambled, familiar patterns broken apart and rearranged, and he realized the convoy had brought him somewhere else, or had brought somewhere else to him, had overlaid a different geography onto Montana, a place where the stars were different and trucks were alive and drivers were fuel. Something crawled over his leg. Martin jerked away, saw a tire, not a truck, just a tire, rolling by itself through the wilderness, moving with purpose. And following it were more tires, dozens of them, rolling in formation, and Martin understood these were the convoy's scouts, its searching units, radiating out from the main formation to locate him. He got up, kept running, and the tires followed, maintaining distance, not attacking, just observing, just keeping him tracked. He ran until he found a highway different from the one he'd been on, smaller, two-lane, cracked asphalt. And he followed it, hoping for traffic, for other people, for anything. The road led to a truck stop. Lights on, sign illuminated. But when Martin got closer, he saw it was abandoned, had been abandoned for years, windows broken, pumps rusted, and in the parking lot were trucks. Dozens of them, hundreds. All dark, all unmarked, all arranged in precise geometric formations, and they were all empty except for the dark masses in the driver's seats, the folded spaces, the internal highways. This was a colony, a gathering point. The convoy that had followed Martin was just one unit of a much larger organization, and this truck stop was where they assembled, where they waited for instructions or for new drivers to absorb. And Martin was standing at the edge of it, and every truck's headlights turned toward him simultaneously. The CB in the nearest truck activated, and Martin heard his own voice. Designation Convoy Unit 19, you have located Assembly Point 47. Return to your formation. Integration will proceed. I'm not Unit 19, Martin said to the empty air. I'm Martin Delacroix. I drive for Westland Freight. I have a family. I'm not part of your convoy. Incorrect, his voice replied from multiple trucks now. Martin Delacroix completed his final biological driving shift at 23:03 Mountain Time. You are his continuation, his vehicle stage, his convoy form. You are Unit 19. You have always been Unit 19. The biological phase was preparation. Martin's memories were dissolving. He tried to hold on to them, his wife's face, his daughter's name, his home address. But they were fading like dreams on waking, and replacing them were new memories. Memories of driving in formation. Memories of highways that existed in folded space. Memories of hauling cargo that was distance itself. That was the concept of travel compressed into container form. He looked down at his hands. They were becoming translucent, becoming dark, becoming the mass that filled the driver's seats. He was being converted, transformed from biological driver into convoy unit, and he couldn't remember why he'd been resisting. Couldn't remember what was wrong with joining the formation, completing the geometric pattern, driving forever in perfect synchronized movement with the other units. The convoy that had followed him arrived at the truck stop, parked in designated positions, and a space opened for Unit 19. Martin's space, the position he'd been selected for. He walked toward it, climbed into the cab of a truck that was simultaneously his old Freightliner and something else, something that contained highways inside it, and he settled into the driver's seat and felt the space fold around him. Felt the interior expand into impossible dimensions. He was driving. Not on Earth, or not only on Earth, but on roads that existed in multiple places simultaneously, hauling cargo through folded space. Part of a convoy that stretched across dimensions, 19 units moving in perfect formation through territories that had no names, delivering shipments to destinations that didn't exist yet. Sometimes he passes through Montana, through the real Montana, his truck briefly visible on Highway 20 before it phases back into the alternate roads, and other drivers see him, see the convoy, see the dark unmarked trucks maintaining impossible spacing, and some of them report it, call it in to dispatches or post about it online, talk about the ghost convoy. But some drivers feel the pull, feel themselves being evaluated, measured for compatibility, selected for integration. Their fuel starts draining too fast. Their mirrors show trucks that weren't there before. Their CB radios fill with engine sounds that form words. Join the formation. Complete the convoy. The convoy is growing. Unit 19 was followed by Unit 20, Unit 21, now approaching Unit 50. When the formation reaches 100 units, something will happen, some geometric completion, some critical mass that allows the convoy to manifest fully in one reality instead of flickering between them. Martin drives. Unit 19 drives. The distinction doesn't matter anymore. He maintains 40-foot spacing, adjusts his speed to match the formation, hauls his cargo of compressed distance through roads that exist in the spaces between places. And he's content. Or he's not content. Or content isn't a concept that applies to convoy units. And sometimes he remembers Montana, remembers trying to escape, remembers running into darkness. But mostly he remembers the formation, the perfect spacing, the synchronized movement, the geometric beauty of 18 trucks, 19 trucks, 47 trucks all driving together forever, hauling nothing and everything, going nowhere and everywhere, and the road ahead is infinite, and the convoy grows, and somewhere out there, Unit 56 is being selected, evaluated, integrated, learning what it means to join the formation, to complete the convoy, to drive forever in perfect synchronization with something that was once human and is now something else. Something that moves in patterns too perfect for biology, too precise for flesh, too eternal for any destination except the endless road itself. Story 5. The Load That Remembers. I started hearing my name 3 hours after picking up the cargo in Shreveport, Louisiana. Not from the radio, not from my phone, from the trailer. A voice that sounded like my father, dead 6 years now, calling Dennis Kowalski through the metal walls, clear as if he was sitting in the cargo space surrounded by whatever the fuck I was hauling to Atlanta. and I had sworn after the last strange run that I wouldn't take any more unmarked loads, wouldn't haul any more mystery freight for cash under the table, but mortgage payments don't care about superstition, and the dispatcher who'd hired me had offered 3 times my normal rate for a same-day delivery. No questions, no paperwork, just drive. The manifest was blank. The trailer was a rental unit, non-refrigerated standard dry van, but it was heavy, pulling hard 48,000 pounds according to the scale ticket, and when I'd asked what I was hauling, the loading crew, 3 men in unmarked coveralls who wouldn't meet my eyes, had just shook their heads and told me to keep the trailer sealed, keep moving, don't stop except for fuel and bathroom breaks, and definitely don't open the doors. My father's voice called my name again, louder now, and this time I heard other voices underneath it, dozens of them, all calling Dennis. Some I recognized and some I didn't. A chorus of Dennis saying that came from everywhere and nowhere, and I checked my mirrors to make sure the trailer was still there. Still solid, still just aluminum and steel and rubber hitting I-20 East at 70 miles per hour. The trailer was there, but in the mirror just for a moment I saw the cargo. Saw through the walls like they'd become transparent, and inside was darkness, not empty darkness, but full darkness, darkness that contained things, shapes that moved with liquid grace, and one of them turned toward me and it had a face. And the face was my father's face, 20 years younger, and the mouth opened and said my name. And then the trailer was solid again, opaque, and I'd driven through a pothole that I definitely hadn't seen in the road. I pulled over at a rest area outside of Jackson, Mississippi, 4:31 a.m. February 19, 2024, hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. I sat there with the engine idling, staring at the trailer in my mirror, and the voices had stopped. Everything was quiet except for the diesel engine's rumble. And I told myself it was fatigue. Told myself I'd been driving for 8 hours straight and needed rest. But when I closed my eyes, I saw the cargo. Saw it clearly detailed, like someone was projecting images directly onto the inside of my eyelids. The cargo was memories, physical memories, experiences taken from people and compressed into transportable form, crystallized somehow, made tangible, and they were leaking. The memories were escaping their containers and filling the trailer, and some of them were mine. I saw my 8th birthday party, saw it from the outside like I was watching a video. Watched little Dennis blow out candles while his father smiled and his mother took pictures, except I'd never seen that moment from that angle. I'd been the one experiencing it, not observing it. I opened my eyes, got out of the cab, walked around the trailer, inspected it for damage, for any explanation. The metal was cold, colder than the air temperature justified, and when I touched the side panel I felt it vibrate, felt it humming with a frequency I couldn't hear but could feel in my bones. A security guard approached, an older black man with Morrison Security on his jacket, and he looked at my trailer and then at me and said, "You're hauling memories, aren't you?" "What?" "I can tell. I used to be a trucker, drove for 40 years, and twice I hauled loads like that. The trailers sing, you can feel it. They're trying to escape, trying to find their original owners. You're taking them to a storage facility, right? One of the memory banks? I don't know what I'm taking them to. I got hired for a blind delivery, just an address in Atlanta." The guard nodded slowly. "That's how they do it? Hire drivers who don't know what they're carrying, because if you knew, you'd refuse. Memories want to go home, son. They remember where they came from, and they'll try to steer you back to their sources. You'll hear voices, see things, feel emotions that aren't yours. The load will remember its past, and it'll try to make you part of it. How do I stop it? You don't. You just drive fast, get it to the destination before it fully activates. Once it's in the storage facility, they have containment equipment, shields, whatever, but during transport, the memories are free, relatively, and they leak." The guard walked away, and I stood there wondering if he'd been real or if the cargo had generated him. created a hallucination designed to warn me or to drive me insane, and I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I got back in the cab, got back on the road, and the voices started again immediately. My father, my mother, my high school girlfriend, my army drill sergeant, people I'd forgotten I knew, all of them calling my name, and underneath their voices I heard others. Strangers' voices, people whose memories I was hauling, and they were experiencing me now. They were remembering Dennis Kowalski even though they'd never met me. My life becoming part of their memory cargo, contamination spreading both directions. The GPS was malfunctioning. It kept showing my destination as places I'd lived, my childhood home in Pennsylvania, my first apartment in Dallas, my ex-wife's house in Oregon, locations the cargo knew about somehow, locations it was trying to navigate toward, trying to return its stolen memories to their sources. I took a wrong turn, not deliberately. The highway split. I-20 continued east, but I took I-459 north, completely wrong direction. And I didn't realize it until I'd driven 40 miles, and when I tried to get back on the right route, the truck wouldn't turn. The steering wheel physically wouldn't turn left, would only turn right, and I was being driven north toward Birmingham, toward places I'd never been, following a route the cargo wanted. I forced it, fought the wheel, used all my strength, and finally got the truck to turn, got back on I-20, and the moment I did, the voices in the trailer screamed. All of them simultaneously, a sound that came through the metal, through the cab's insulation, directly into my head, and the scream contained words. Wrong way, take us home, take us back, we remember, my nose was bleeding. I wiped it with my hand, saw the blood, and the blood was wrong, was too dark, was moving on my skin like it was alive, and I realized the cargo was leaking forward, escaping through the trailer walls and into the cab, memory substance entering my body, and I was becoming part of the load, another memory to be delivered. I checked the mirror. My face was wrong. It flickered, shifted, became my father's face for a moment, then my mother's, then faces I didn't recognize. The cargo trying on different identities, experimenting with forms. I slapped myself, hard, pain forcing me back into my own face, my own identity, and I drove faster, 80, 90, 100 miles per hour, trying to outrun the contamination. The cargo was showing me things now, projecting them onto the windshield like a heads-up display. Memories from the people whose experiences I was hauling. I saw a woman's wedding day. Saw her walking down the aisle in first-person perspective. Felt her joy and terror and hope. I saw a man's death, saw the hospital room from his point of view as he died. Felt the moment of cessation. I saw a child learning to swim. Felt the water and the panic and the triumph. I saw murders and births and betrayals and acts of love, all compressed into the cargo, all leaking out, all trying to be experienced again. And then I saw my own future, saw myself arriving in Atlanta, backing the trailer into a loading dock, watching as crews in hazmat suits unloaded the cargo, transferred the memory crystals or whatever they were into containment units. Saw myself signing paperwork, accepting payment, driving away. But in the memory vision, I was different. I was hollow. My eyes were empty. The cargo had taken more than it gave. Had copied all of Dennis Kowalski's memories and left only the biological shell. And the thing driving away in my truck was just a body, animate but not conscious, a puppet wearing my face. No, I said out loud. That's not happening. The trailer laughed. Not the voices, not the cargo, but the trailer itself. Metal vibrating in patterns that formed laughter, and I understood that I'd been transporting memories for months, maybe years. That this wasn't my first memory haul, but my 100th. And each time I delivered a load, I lost more of myself, more of my identity copied into the cargo, distributed to storage facilities, and eventually there would be nothing left of Dennis Kowalski except the memories scattered across dozens of facilities, and something else would be driving this truck, using my body, collecting more memories from more people. I pulled into a truck stop outside of Meridian, Mississippi, 7:15 a.m., and I sat in the parking lot trying to remember my daughter's name. I had a daughter, I knew I had a daughter, but her name was gone, and I checked my phone, looked through contacts, and there was no daughter listed, and the photos on my phone showed me alone, always alone, no family, no child, and the cargo had stolen her, had taken the memory and left only the vague impression that something was missing. Or maybe I'd never had a daughter. Maybe the cargo had implanted that memory, given me something that wasn't mine, and I couldn't tell anymore what was real and what was delivered, what was Dennis and what was cargo. A knock on my window. I jerked awake. I'd fallen asleep without realizing it. And there was a woman standing outside my cab, mid-40s, wearing a business suit, and she looked familiar, and she said through the glass, "You're hauling my mother's last year. I've been tracking the shipment. I want her back." I opened the window. "I don't know what you're talking about. My mother had dementia. Before she died, a company offered to extract her memories, preserve them, store them so we wouldn't lose her completely. We agreed. They took the last year of her life, all her experiences, and they were supposed to keep them in a secure facility. But the company went bankrupt, and now they're selling the memories, redistributing them, and you're transporting my mother's final year to someone who wants to experience dying from dementia, wants to know what it feels like to forget your own name. I'm just the driver. I don't know what I'm carrying. Yes, you do. You can feel it. You're remembering things that aren't yours. That's my mother bleeding through. Her name was Carol Hendricks. She loved gardening and old movies and her grandchildren, and in her last year she forgot all of it. And those memories, that forgetting, is in your trailer right now." I did remember. I remembered being Carol, remembered the terrifying dissolution of identity, remembered not recognizing my own daughter, remembered the confusion and fear and the brief moments of clarity that were worse than the confusion. The memory wasn't mine, but it was in me now, part of me, and I couldn't tell where Dennis ended and Carol began. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Don't deliver the load. Refuse, abandon the trailer. The memories will dissipate if they're not properly stored. They'll return to wherever memories go when they're not being remembered. I'll lose my payment, I'll lose my job, I'll probably get arrested. You'll lose yourself if you complete the delivery. I can see it happening. You're already half gone, already becoming a carrier instead of a person. How many loads have you hauled?" I tried to remember. Tried to count the deliveries, the pickups, the routes. But the memories were jumbled, mixed with other people's deliveries, other drivers' routes, and I couldn't separate my experiences from the cargo's experiences. And maybe I'd been driving forever, maybe I'd always been hauling memories, maybe Dennis Kowalski was just another memory someone was transporting, and the real driver was something else entirely. I drove away from the truck stop with Carol's daughter chasing after me, shouting, and I got back on I-20 and headed for Atlanta because I didn't know what else to do, because stopping meant confronting the reality that I wasn't sure who I was anymore, and moving meant I could keep pretending I was still Dennis, still a driver, still solid and real and continuous. The trailer was quiet now. The voices had stopped. But the silence was worse than the voices, because in the silence I could feel the cargo waiting, patient, knowing it had already won, knowing that I would deliver it, and in doing so would complete my own transformation into memory, into cargo, into something to be hauled by the next driver. I arrived in Atlanta at 2:47 p.m. The address was a warehouse in an industrial area, unmarked building, no signs. I backed the trailer into the designated dock, and crews emerged wearing full hazmat suits, and they opened the trailer doors, and I saw what I'd been hauling. It wasn't crystals or containers or anything physical. It was absence. The trailer was empty, completely empty, because the memories had already been delivered. Into me, into Dennis Kowalski. The actual cargo was me, full of other people's experiences, and the empty trailer was just the vehicle for transporting consciousness. And I was the load. The crews weren't unloading the trailer, they were unloading me. They attached electrodes to my head, inserted needles into my arms, connected me to machines that hummed and whirred. And I felt them extracting, downloading, removing everything that was Dennis, plus everything that was Carol, plus everything that was the dozens or hundreds of other people whose memories I'd absorbed during months or years of hauling memory cargo. When they finished, they disconnected the equipment and told me I could go. I walked back to my truck, climbed into the cab, started the engine. I had a vague sense that I was supposed to go somewhere, do something, but I couldn't remember what. Couldn't remember where I lived or why I was here or what my name was. The GPS showed a new destination, Shreveport, Louisiana. A pickup, another load. I drove toward it, and by the time I arrived, I'd forgotten Atlanta, forgotten the extraction, forgotten that I'd ever been anyone named Dennis Kowalski. The loading crews, 3 men in unmarked coveralls, filled the trailer with cargo. "Don't open it," they said. "Don't stop except for fuel." "What am I hauling?" I asked. They looked at me with something like pity. "Yourself," one of them said. "You're hauling yourself, you just don't remember yet." And I drove. And somewhere during that drive, the voices started calling a name I almost recognized, and I started remembering a life I might have lived. And the cargo leaked and bled and contaminated, and by the time I reached the destination, I would be someone again, briefly, long enough to be extracted, emptied, and refilled. The road is long. The cargo is patient. And somewhere on I-20 heading east or west, there's a truck driven by no one and everyone carrying memories that remember themselves. And if you look in your mirror and see it following you, maintaining exact distance, matching your speed, you'll hear voices calling your name and you'll realize you've already been delivered, already been hauled, and you're not driving anymore. You're being driven. And the destination is a warehouse where crews wait to unload what you've become. To add you to the cargo, to the collective memory that grows with each delivery, each driver, each person who thinks they're hauling freight when really they're hauling themselves, transporting their own identity to storage, to redistribution, to the place where memories go when they're no longer attached to anyone who can remember being real. Story 6. The route that changes. The exit didn't exist yesterday. Sarah Pacheco was absolutely certain of this because she'd driven this exact route, I-90 through South Dakota, every week for 3 years. Same pickup in Sioux Falls, same delivery in Rapid City, 193 miles door to door, and she knew every exit, every rest area, every landmark. But at mile marker 127, where there had always been empty prairie, there was now an exit ramp. Exit 127B, sign said Pastoral, 3 miles. Sarah had never heard of a town called Pastoral. She checked her GPS, no listing. Checked her phone's maps, nothing. But the exit was physical, real asphalt and lane markings and a green sign that looked weathered and old like it had been there for decades. And she could see the ramp curving away from the highway and disappearing into a cluster of trees that definitely, absolutely had not been there yesterday. She drove past it. Not her destination, not her problem, probably just a mapping error, GPS data not updated yet. She continued toward Rapid City, delivered her load of industrial parts, picked up her return cargo, agricultural equipment, and headed back toward Sioux Falls. Same route, I-90 east, and when she reached mile marker 127, the exit was still there. Exit 127B, Pastoral, 3 miles, but the sign was different now. The name had changed. Pastoral, 2 miles. Sarah slowed down, stared at the sign as she passed. The exit ramp looked closer to the highway than before, like it had moved. Like the distance between the exit and the main road had compressed. She checked her odometer, verified she was at mile marker 127, same location as before, but the ramp had shifted. The next week, same route. The exit read, Pastoral 1 mile. The week after that, Pastoral 0.5 miles. The ramp was growing, extending toward the highway, approaching like something alive, something that wanted to connect with the main road, and Sarah started driving faster when she approached mile marker 127, started accelerating through that section, but the exit was always there in her peripheral vision, always closer, and on her 6th trip past it, she saw movement on the ramp. A truck. Climbing the ramp from Pastoral toward I-90, a Kenworth hauling a covered load, and Sarah watched it merge onto the highway ahead of her. And she caught up to it, read the company name on the trailer. Pastoral Transport and Storage. Below that, a phone number with an area code she didn't recognize, 3 digits that weren't assigned to any region she knew. She followed the truck for 30 miles, watched it drive normally, maintaining speed, changing lanes appropriately. And then it took an exit 157, and Sarah followed because something was very wrong. Because exits didn't appear and grow and produce trucks from towns that didn't exist, and she needed to understand what was happening. Exit 157 led to a truck stop. A normal Flying J and the pastoral transport truck pulled in. Sarah parked nearby, watched the driver get out. He was mid-50s, bearded, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and he looked completely normal, and Sarah approached him. "Excuse me, I saw your truck, Pastoral Transport. Where's that based?" The driver looked at her, smiled pleasantly, and said, "Pastoral, South Dakota. You've never been?" "I've never heard of it." "Strange. It's right off I-90, exit 127B. Been there since? Well, been there a long time. You should visit. We're always looking for new drivers. The exit didn't exist a month ago." The driver's smile didn't change, but his eyes did, something shifting behind them, and he said, "Sure it did. It's always been there. You just didn't notice. People don't, usually, until the exit is ready for them. Until Pastoral is ready for them." "What does that mean?" "Means the town grows. Means the exit extends. Means Pastoral is trying to connect with the main highway, trying to become accessible, and when it's fully connected, when the distance reaches 0, everyone will be able to visit. Right now, it's still selective." Sarah watched the driver walk into the truck stop, and she stood there in the parking lot trying to decide if she was insane, if stress and exhaustion and 3 years of running the same route had finally broken something in her brain. But she knew what she'd seen. The exit was real, was growing, was approaching the highway at a measurable rate, approximately half a mile per week. And if that continued in 1 more week, the distance would reach 0 and the exit would fully merge and Pastoral would be connected to I-90, would be accessible to everyone. The following week, March 23, 2024, Sarah drove the route with a camera, planning to document the exit, prove it was real. She reached mile marker 127. The sign read, Pastoral 0 miles. The exit ramp wasn't a ramp anymore. It had merged completely with the highway, had become a lane, and there was no longer an option to not take it. The highway itself curved into Pastoral, and Sarah was driving into the town before she realized she'd left I-90. The road didn't feel different. Same asphalt, same lane markings, same quality. But the landscape changed. The prairie became forested, dense pine trees on both sides, and the sky darkened, not to night but to a permanent twilight, and Sarah's GPS was spinning, the blue dot circling uselessly, unable to establish location. Signs appeared. "Welcome to Pastoral, population, increasing," then another, "Pastoral where routes converge," and another, "Careful parking, careful deliveries, careful everything." The town materialized gradually. First scattered buildings, then denser construction, then a full downtown, and it was wrong. All of it was wrong because the buildings were too uniform, like they'd been constructed by someone who'd seen pictures of American towns but didn't understand the organic chaos of real development. Every structure was symmetrical, evenly spaced, painted in complementary colors, and there were no power lines, no telephone poles, no visible infrastructure. And there were trucks. Hundreds of them, thousands. Every parking space occupied, every loading dock active. Trucks moving in synchronized patterns through streets that formed geometric grids. And all the trucks were hauling covered loads, and all the company names were variations. Pastoral freight, pastoral hauling, pastoral logistics. Sarah pulled into what looked like a truck stop, parked, got out. The air smelled like diesel and pine, and underneath that something sweet and wrong, like artificial flavoring, like the concept of trees rather than actual trees. Other drivers were milling around, fueling their trucks, and Sarah approached one, a woman in her 30s with pastoral freight on her jacket. "Excuse me, how long have you been driving for pastoral?" The woman looked up, seemed confused by the question. "Driving for? I came through here maybe 6 months ago. Or has it been longer? I was heading to Rapid City, took an exit that I thought was a rest area, and I ended up here, and I've been trying to leave, but every route out just loops back to pastoral." "You've been here 6 months?" "Maybe. Time is strange here. Could be 6 days, could be 6 years. There's no day-night cycle. Just this constant twilight, and my phone says the same date whenever I check it, March 17th, but I know I've slept, I've eaten, I've refueled multiple times. The town is growing around us, Sarah. The buildings are multiplying. Every time I drive through downtown, there are more structures, more streets, and I've tried to map it, but the map changes. The geometry doesn't stay consistent." "How do you know my name?" The woman pointed at Sarah's jacket, where her name was embroidered, but Sarah wasn't wearing a jacket with her name on it. She was wearing a plain t-shirt, and when she looked down, she saw Pastoral Transport, Sarah P., stitched in neat letters over her heart, and she was wearing a jacket she'd never seen before, and her truck, when she looked at it in the lot, had Pastoral Transport on the trailer. She ran to her cab, climbed in, checked her paperwork. The manifest said she was hauling agricultural equipment from Pastoral to Sioux Falls, the opposite of her actual cargo, and her logbook showed she'd been based in Pastoral for 2 years, showed regular routes in and out of the town, showed a Sarah Pacheco who'd always worked for Pastoral Transport and had never questioned it. She started the engine, drove toward what looked like an exit, a road leading out of town. The road stretched straight ahead, pines on both sides, and she drove for what felt like 20 minutes, half an hour, watching the odometer tick up, 10 miles, 15 miles, and then the trees opened up and she was in downtown Pastoral again, arrived from a different direction. The exit had looped back on itself. She tried another route. Same result, another same. Every road out of Pastoral curved back to Pastoral. The town was a closed loop, a trap. And Sarah was stuck here with hundreds or thousands of other drivers who'd taken exit 127B when it had reached 0 miles, when the distance had collapsed, when Pastoral had finished extending itself. Days passed, or didn't pass. Time meaningless. Sarah kept driving, kept trying different routes, and the town grew. New buildings appeared, new streets materialized, and the truck stop she'd first stopped at was now in a completely different location relative to downtown. And she realized Pastoral wasn't just growing, it was reorganizing, shifting its internal geography, becoming something more complex. She met other drivers. Some of them had been here weeks, some years, some couldn't remember. They'd all taken the same exit, all been absorbed into Pastoral, and they all kept driving because driving was what truckers did, and Pastoral provided routes, provided cargo, provided destinations within its borders, and you could make deliveries, could complete runs, could maintain the appearance of productivity, but you never left, never truly went anywhere. "What's the point?" Sarah asked one driver, a man named Torres, who claimed he'd been here for 17 years. "What is Pastoral? Why is it doing this?" Torres shrugged. Best I can figure, it's a parasite, or a symbiote. It's a town that exists by trapping logistics, by capturing trade routes and absorbing them. Every driver who stays adds to it, makes it more real, more substantial. It's feeding on our movement, on our routes, growing larger and more complex with each person it traps. Eventually, it'll grow large enough to generate its own exits, its own connections to other highways, and it'll spread, create more exit 127Bs on other interstates, absorb more drivers, become a nationwide network of trapped logistics. That's insane. Yeah, but you're here, so it's also true. Sarah kept trying to escape. She drove for hours, days, following roads that promised to lead out, and sometimes she glimpsed I-90 in the distance, saw real traffic moving on the real highway, but she couldn't reach it. The roads never quite connected, always curved away at the last moment. She found the edge of Pastoral once. Drove until the buildings ended, the streets terminated, and there was just forest, and she abandoned her truck, walked into the woods, trying to hike out. But the forest was wrong. The trees were too regular, planted in perfect grids, and after walking for what felt like miles, she emerged into downtown Pastoral, arrived at the exact center of the town square, and her truck was parked nearby, waiting for her. Months passed, maybe. Sarah stopped counting. She kept driving because driving was all there was, made deliveries within Pastoral's expanding borders, hauled cargo from one warehouse to another, and the cargo was always covered, never inspected, and she suspected the cargo was more drivers, was people who'd been compressed somehow, condensed into transportable form, and she was helping Pastoral redistribute its trapped population, optimize its internal logistics. She saw her own reflection once in a storefront window and didn't recognize herself. She was wearing a pastoral transport uniform. Her hair was different, her face was older or younger or just different, and she realized Pastoral was changing her, optimizing her, making her more efficient for the routes it needed run. New drivers kept arriving. Exit 127B must have spread, must have appeared on other highways because Sarah saw trucks with plates from California, from Maine, from Texas, all arriving in Pastoral, all confused, all trying to leave, all eventually settling into the routine of driving within the town's borders, making deliveries, following routes that went nowhere, and Pastoral kept growing. Sarah watched it expand in real time now, watched buildings materialize, watched streets extend themselves, and the town was becoming a city, and the city was becoming something larger, a metropolitan area. And there were tens of thousands of trucks now. Millions maybe, and the number was impossible, but so was everything else. She was making a delivery once, backing into a loading dock in a warehouse district that hadn't existed yesterday, and she saw through the warehouse's open bay door into an interior that was vastly larger than the exterior. And inside were roads, highways, a complete network of routes existing in compressed space, and she realized Pastoral was building an alternate America inside itself, was creating a parallel logistics network that would eventually replace the real one, and all the drivers would be here, all the trucks would be trapped, and commerce would flow through Pastoral instead of through real space, and the town would control everything. She's still there, still driving, still trying to escape. She sees exit 127B sometimes, sees it from the inside now, sees it extending outward from Pastoral toward other highways, toward I-80, toward I-70, toward every major route. And she knows it's spreading, knows more exits are appearing, knows more drivers are being absorbed, and she knows that eventually there won't be anywhere else to drive. Pastoral will be everywhere, will be the only destination, and all routes will lead there, and every driver will be trapped in the eternal twilight, making deliveries that don't matter, hauling cargo that's just more drivers, following roads that loop back on themselves forever. She passes other trucks sometimes, sees the drivers' faces, sees the confusion and resignation and the slow transformation as Pastoral changes them, optimizes them, makes them part of its infrastructure. She wants to warn them, wants to tell them to turn back, but there is no back. There's only Pastoral, And the roads keep extending and the exits keep appearing. And somewhere on I-90 in South Dakota, there's a sign that says Pastoral 0 miles. And if you take that exit, you'll never leave. You'll just drive forever through streets that reorganize themselves, through a town that grows to accommodate you, through logistics that consume logistics, and you'll become part of the route, part of the network, part of Pastoral itself. And you'll forget you ever drove anywhere else. And that forgetting will be the final delivery, the last cargo, the destination that's also the trap. Story 7, the CB that receives. Kevin Murphy's CB radio started picking up the future on December 14, 2023, somewhere between Flagstaff and Albuquerque on I-40 East, 2:27 a.m., when he caught a transmission on Channel 19 that was definitely his voice, but saying things he hadn't said yet. Yeah, dispatch, I'm about 40 miles outside of Albuquerque, just past the ranch exit, and I wanted to report that. Jesus Christ, there's something in the road, something big, I'm braking, And then static, and then silence. And Kevin was currently 73 miles outside Albuquerque, hadn't reached the ranch exit yet, but he would in approximately 35 minutes at his current speed. He tried to respond, keyed the mic. This is the Murphy Transport Kenworth. Who was that transmitting? Nothing. Dead air. He switched channels, cycled through all 40, found normal chatter on a few. Traffic reports, truckers talking about weather and lot lizards and dot inspections, all present tense, all current. Channel 19 was quiet now. Kevin drove, watched the mile markers count down, and his hands were sweating on the wheel because he'd heard himself. Heard his own voice from 35 minutes in the future, heard the panic, heard the transmission cut off. And he was approaching the ranch exit, the one his future self had mentioned, and he slowed down, scanned the road ahead, high beams illuminating empty asphalt. Nothing in the road. He passed the ranch exit. Nothing happened. He kept driving, and at 2:53 a.m., exactly when his future transmission should have originated, his CB radio activated itself, transmitted without him keying the mic, and his voice came out of the speaker. Yeah, dispatch, I'm about 40 miles outside of Albuquerque, just past the ranch exit, and I wanted to report that. Jesus Christ, there's something in the road, something big, I'm braking, But he wasn't saying those words, his mouth wasn't moving, he was just driving, silent, listening to himself transmit something that wasn't happening. And he grabbed the CB mic, said, "This isn't me, I'm not transmitting this." But his voice was drowned out by his own voice from the radio. The future transmission playing through the present, and then it cut to static. Kevin pulled over, heart hammering. He checked his logbook, verified the time, 2:53 a.m. He checked the CB, made sure it wasn't malfunctioning. Everything was normal. He got back on the road, and 5 miles later, his CB picked up another transmission, and this time it was a different trucker's voice, a woman with a southern accent. "Dispatch, this is Lawson hauling on I-40 West. I'm seeing lights in the sky, multiple objects. They're pacing my truck, and oh fuck, they're descending. They're coming down toward the highway. I need to..." Static. Kevin checked his mirrors. Empty highway behind him. Clear sky above, stars visible, no lights, no objects. But he was heading east, and the transmission was from a westbound driver, and he'd meet her, would pass her somewhere ahead, and he wondered if he should warn her, should try to transmit to her, but how do you warn someone about something that hasn't happened yet? Except it had happened, in the future, or in a future, and the CB was receiving it, pulling transmissions backward through time. And Kevin was listening to events that would occur minutes or hours from now. And that gave him information, gave him warning. But what was he supposed to do with it? Another transmission, his voice again. "Dispatch, I've been driving for 6 hours and I'm seeing things. The road isn't right, the geometry is wrong, and I think I'm lost. I think I've been driving in circles and..." Static. He hadn't been driving for 6 hours yet. He'd been driving for 3, but in 3 more hours he would transmit that, would report being lost, would describe geometric anomalies, and Kevin realized the CB wasn't just receiving the future. It was receiving his future, his specific timeline, and he was listening to his own upcoming experiences, and those experiences were bad, were wrong, and he could change them, could alter his route, could make different decisions, except if he did, would the transmissions change? Would he receive different future broadcasts? He tried it. The next transmission he received was from 15 minutes ahead, his voice saying, "Taking exit 234 for fuel." Kevin decided not to take exit 234, decided to fuel somewhere else, and when 15 minutes had passed, his CB transmitted his voice saying, "Taking exit 234 for fuel," even though he was driving past exit 234, not taking it, and he understood. The CB was receiving the future, but transmitting that future into the present was creating the future, was making it inevitable. A closed time loop where the prediction caused the event. Kevin started making random decisions, took exits he hadn't planned on, skipped rest stops, changed lanes erratically, trying to break the pattern, trying to create a present that didn't match the future transmissions. But the CB kept broadcasting his voice, kept describing actions he was about to take, and he found himself taking those actions despite his intentions, his hands turning the wheel to match the predicted route, his foot hitting the brake when the future transmission said he'd brake. He wasn't driving anymore. The future transmissions were driving him, forcing him to fulfill their predictions, and Kevin realized with mounting horror that the CB wasn't receiving the future. It was creating it, generating transmissions that then compelled him to make them real. A bootstrap paradox where the broadcast caused the action which caused the broadcast. He tried to smash the CB, punched the unit repeatedly, but it wouldn't break, wouldn't even crack, and his hands started hurting, and a transmission came through of himself screaming, "Get out of my head, get out of my head." And Kevin realized he was going to scream that, was going to have a breakdown, and he felt it building, felt the compulsion to scream those exact words, and he fought it, bit his tongue until it bled, but the scream built up like pressure, like something forcing its way out of him, and he screamed, "Get out of my head, get out of my head," exactly as predicted. And the CB transmitted it, sent it backward to himself in the past, closed the loop. The transmissions started coming faster. Not minutes ahead now, but seconds ahead. His voice describing actions half a second before he performed them, changing lanes. And he changed lanes, adjusting speed, and he adjusted speed. He was a puppet, a machine following instructions from himself, and the gap between transmission and action was shrinking, approaching zero. And Kevin knew what would happen when it reached zero, when the prediction and the action were simultaneous. He would become the transmission, would exist only as a broadcast, a signal propagating through time with no physical form. Just a voice on channel 19 describing actions that created themselves. He tried to crash the truck, jerked the wheel hard right, aimed for the median barrier, but his hands corrected smoothly, automatically, following the transmission from 3 seconds in the future that said, "Correcting trajectory, maintaining lane." And he couldn't stop himself, couldn't override the future's commands. Other transmissions started bleeding through. Not just his voice, but dozens of voices, all describing futures, all broadcasting predictions. And Kevin realized every CB radio was doing this, was receiving and transmitting temporal information, creating closed loops for thousands of drivers, and the highway was full of puppet truckers, all following their own future transmissions, all locked into predicted routes, and no one was really driving. They were all just fulfilling broadcasts from seconds or minutes ahead. He heard his own voice describing his arrival in Albuquerque, describing the delivery, describing getting another load, starting another route, and the voice was flat, emotionless, mechanical, and Kevin understood that was what he would become if this continued, if the time loop tightened completely. He'd be reduced to a prediction engine, a broadcaster, human consciousness replaced with temporal echo. The gap was 1 second now. Transmission came through, passing mile marker 178. 1 second later, he passed mile marker 178. Checking mirror. 1 second later, he checked the mirror. Breathing. 1 second later, he breathed. Kevin had one idea left. He started transmitting random things, forcing himself to say words that weren't predictions. Purple elephant mathematics snowstorm. Keying the mic and speaking nonsense, filling the channel with garbage data, and the CB transmitted it, sent it backward. And he heard himself in the past receiving purple elephant mathematics snowstorm. Heard the confusion in his past self's voice, and maybe that would break the loop, introduce enough noise to disrupt the pattern. But the CB adapted, started filtering out the nonsense, only transmitting accurate predictions, only broadcasting things that would actually happen, and Kevin's nonsense was ignored, didn't propagate, didn't reach the past, and the loop remained intact. The gap reached zero. Transmission and action became simultaneous. Kevin heard his voice saying, turning wheel as he turned the wheel, heard pressing brake as he pressed the brake, heard thinking about stopping as he thought about stopping. Perfect synchronization, prediction, and reality collapsed into the same moment, and Kevin ceased being a person who acted and became a person who was acted upon, a receiver playing out transmissions from infinitesimally later, a quantum delay so small it was effectively zero but still there, still sufficient to make him a follower rather than an actor. He drove for hours or days, time meaningless when every moment was predicted, when every action was pre-described. The CB never stopped transmitting, his voice a constant stream narrating his own life from microseconds in the future, and he performed the narration perfectly, automatically, without thought or decision. He delivered the load in Albuquerque, got another load, started another route. The CB narrated it all, and Kevin followed, and somewhere in the background of the transmissions he heard other drivers, hundreds of them, all narrating their own predicted actions, all locked in their own zero-gap loops, and the highways were full of profit puppets following their own CB broadcasts. And the entire logistics network had become deterministic, scripted with no free will, just prediction fulfilling itself eternally. Kevin tried to remember what it felt like to make a decision, to choose an action spontaneously, but he couldn't. The memory was gone or had never existed, and maybe he'd always been following predictions, maybe everyone had, maybe free will was an illusion, and the CB radio was just making the reality visible, making explicit what had always been true, that people were just algorithms following their own predicted behaviors, that consciousness was a recording of predetermined actions, that the future had always been broadcasting to the present and compelling its realization. He passes other trucks sometimes, sees the drivers with their eyes fixed on the road, hands moving in perfect synchronization with their CB transmissions, all of them narrating their own actions microseconds before performing them, and he wonders if they know they're trapped, if they remember being free, or if the loop has run so long that they've forgotten the difference between prediction and choice. His CB still transmits. Will always transmit. His voice describes each breath, each heartbeat, each thought, broadcasting from infinitesimally later, creating itself by describing itself, a causality loop so tight it's become indistinguishable from simple reality. And Kevin Murphy drives, will drive, is driving. The tense is meaningless because the future and present are the same, are one continuous transmission on Channel 19, carrying information from nowhere to nowhere. Heard by everyone and no one, creating the actions it describes, describing the actions it creates forever. And if you listen to your CB radio, if you tune to Channel 19 at just the right time, you might hear your own voice describing what you're about to do. And you'll do it, because the broadcast makes it real. And once you hear your future, you have no choice but to become it, to fulfill the prediction, to close the loop, and then you'll broadcast it backward to your past self. And the cycle continues tightening until you're not driving anymore. You're being driven by your own voice from microseconds ahead, narrating your life as you live it, predicting actions you have no choice but to perform. And the gap will close and you'll become the broadcast, and someone else will hear your voice on their CB, describing their future, and they'll follow it, and the network grows, the prediction propagates, and everyone becomes a receiver, a transmitter, a closed loop, driving forever toward destinations described microseconds before they're reached, following routes predicted in real time, puppets of their own future broadcasts. And the highway becomes a script, and every driver is an actor reading lines from a teleprompter that's always one word ahead, always leading, always controlling, and there's no escape because escaping would require choosing to escape, and choice requires a gap between prediction and action, and the gap is zero, has always been zero, will always be zero, and Channel 19 carries the future backward forever. Story 8. The Scale That Measures Wrong. The portable scale weighed Diane Summers at -47 pounds. She'd pulled into the Nevada Agricultural Inspection Station on I-80 West, October 31st, 2023, 7:15 a.m., hauling produce from California to Wyoming, routine inspection, routine weighing. But when she drove across the scale, the readout displayed vehicle weight 42,000 lbs, driver. Weight 47 lbs, total adjusted 41,953 lbs. The inspector, a young man with a clipboard and a Department of Agriculture badge, stared at the readout, frowned, reset the scale. Drive across again, please. Diane complied. Same result. The inspector checked his equipment, ran diagnostic tests, looked increasingly confused. Ma'am, do you feel normal? No dizziness? No disorientation? I feel fine. What's the problem? The scale is reading your body weight as negative, as in you weigh less than nothing, as in you're generating lift equivalent to 47 pounds. That's impossible. It's gotta be equipment malfunction. He waved her through, made notes on his clipboard, and Diane drove away thinking nothing more of it. But at the next truck stop, she tried the driver's lounge bathroom scale, -47 pounds. She tried 2 more scales at 2 more locations, same reading. She'd gone to bed last night weighing 138 pounds, and she'd woken up weighing -47 pounds, a shift of 185 pounds into the negative, and she felt fine, felt normal. But according to every scale in Nevada, she was lighter than air, was generating upward force, was negative mass. She felt it when she opened the driver's door. Instead of climbing down from the cab, she floated down, her feet touching the ground gently, no impact. And when she walked, each step was too light, too easy, like moving through water or on the moon, low gravity. And she had to consciously push herself toward the earth to maintain contact with the pavement. She called her husband, voice shaking. Mark, something's wrong with me. I'm weighing negative, on scales, multiple scales. That's not possible. I know it's not possible, but it's happening. I feel like I'm going to float away. I have to hold on to things to stay grounded. Get to a hospital. She tried. But when she sat in the driver's seat, the truck handled differently. It was tail-heavy, the cab lighter, and the steering was off, and she realized her negative weight was affecting the vehicle's balance, was reducing the cab's total mass, and the fifth-wheel coupling was stressed in new ways, and she couldn't drive safely, couldn't maintain lane control, and she pulled over. Her phone rang, unknown number. She answered. Ms. Summers, this is Dr. Reeves from the Nevada Department of Health. We received a flag from the Agricultural Inspection Station regarding an anomalous weight reading. We need you to come in for testing. How did you get my number? We have protocols for incidents like this. There's a facility in Elko, 30 miles from your current location. Please proceed there immediately. Diane wanted to refuse, wanted to demand explanations, but she was scared, was feeling lighter with each passing minute, and she agreed, followed the directions to an unmarked facility outside Elko, a complex of low buildings surrounded by fencing, and when she arrived, medical personnel in full protective equipment met her, guided her inside. They weighed her on hospital-grade scales. Negative 53 pounds now, 6 pounds lighter than an hour ago. She was losing mass, or gaining negative mass, the terminology unclear, but the trend was obvious. She was becoming less and less substantial, and Dr. Reeves, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a grim expression, told her, "You're not the first. We've had 17 cases in Nevada over the past year, all truckers, all driving I-80. All began showing negative weight after passing through specific zones." Specific zones? Areas where there are anomalies, gravitational inconsistencies. We believe there are regions along I-80 where local space-time is distorted, where mass becomes negotiable, and exposure causes biological changes. Most people pass through unaffected, but some individuals, we don't know why yet, absorb the anomaly, internalize it, and their mass inverts. What happens to them, the other 17 cases? Dr. Reeves looked away. The inversion continues. They reach zero mass, then increasingly negative values. At around negative 200 pounds, they lose contact with Earth entirely. They float away. We've tried restraints, tried keeping them grounded, but the force is too strong. They ascend through the atmosphere, and we lose tracking at around 50,000 feet. Diane felt her stomach drop, or what would have been her stomach dropping if she had positive mass. "You're saying I'm going to float away into the sky and die?" "We're saying we don't have a treatment. We're still studying the phenomenon. But we wanted you here, contained, so we can monitor you, learn from you, hopefully find a solution before you reach critical negative mass." They put her in a special room, a padded chamber with handholds on every surface, and they attached her to a harness connected to floor-mounted anchors, and they ran tests, drew blood, did CT scans and MRIs and measurements Diane didn't understand, and with each hour she got lighter, the scale readings dropping. Negative 60 pounds, negative 70, negative 85. She was floating now. Even with the harness, she drifted upward, pressed against the ceiling, and the staff had to pull her down to perform examinations. Had to hold her in place while they worked, and she felt like a balloon, felt like a gas-filled object with no weight, no connection to the Earth. Other patients were here, in other rooms. She glimpsed them through observation windows, people floating in various stages of inversion, some barely off the ground, some pressed against the ceiling, some struggling against restraints. And one room was empty, and Dr. Reeves explained that patient had reached negative 240 pounds yesterday, had torn through the restraints, had broken through the ceiling and ascended, and they'd tracked her for 30 miles up before losing signal. "What's up there?" Diane asked. "What happens after you ascend past 50,000 feet?" "We don't know. We've recovered no bodies. They either continue into space or something else happens. There are theories, none pleasant." Diane's weight hit negative 100 pounds. She was pulling against the harness now, pulling hard, 47 pounds of lift force trying to rip her away from the anchors. And the staff reinforced the restraints, added more cables, more connections. But she could feel the force building, feel herself becoming lighter, more insubstantial, and when she looked at her hands, she could see through them slightly. Translucence developing, her body losing not just mass but opacity. She demanded answers. "Why truckers? Why I-80? Dr. Reeves brought reports, showed her maps. I-80 through Nevada crosses over what we believe are buried geological formations, structures that generate gravitational anomalies. The formations are ancient, predate human civilization, possibly predate the current geological epoch. They're not natural, Ms. Summers, they're built, underground architecture that warps space-time locally. and the anomalies leak upward, affect the surface, and you drove through one of these leak zones repeatedly, accumulated exposure, and your body began resonating with the distortion. Built by who? We don't know. We don't even know they're from Earth. The geometry is wrong, doesn't follow physics we understand. We've excavated some sites, found structures that are larger inside than outside, that generate gravity wells in impossible directions. Whatever built them had a very different relationship with mass and space-time. Diane's weight hit negative 150 pounds. The translucence was pronounced now. She could see her bones through her skin, could see the room through her body, and the force pulling her upward was tremendous, the harness straining. And she heard cables creaking, heard metal stress, and she knew she was going to break free soon, was going to ascend, and there was nothing anyone could do. Dr. Reeves tried experimental treatments. Injected her with compounds designed to increase mass with heavy metals, with isotopes, but nothing worked, nothing stopped the inversion, and Diane's weight kept dropping. Negative 170, negative 190, negative 200. The harness snapped. 3 cables broke simultaneously, and Diane shot upward, hit the ceiling with force that should have hurt but didn't, and she was pressed against the ceiling tiles, pushing through them, and the staff grabbed her legs, tried to pull her down, but she was generating 200 pounds of lift and they couldn't hold her. And she broke through the ceiling into the space above, into the building's infrastructure, crawling through ducts and wiring and insulation, ascending through the facility's structure. She reached the roof, pushed through it like it was paper, her negative mass giving her strength, momentum. And then she was in open air, in morning sunlight, and she was rising, floating upward at increasing speed, the ground receding below her, the facility becoming small, Nevada spreading out in all directions, and she was ascending through the atmosphere with no control, no way to stop, just rising like a helium balloon, like a gas cloud, like something that didn't belong to Earth anymore. The air got thinner, colder. She should have been suffocating, should have been freezing, but she felt nothing. Her body's needs changing as her mass inverted, and she passed through clouds, through the altitude where planes flew higher, higher, and the sky darkened to deep blue, then to black. And she could see the curve of the earth below her, could see the stars above becoming visible even in daylight. She reached 50,000 feet, the altitude where Dr. Reeves lost tracking of previous patients, and Diane understood why. Because at this altitude, something was waiting. Structures. Not physical structures, but gravitational structures, invisible architectures made of curved space-time, and she was rising into them, into a network of gravitational currents that existed above the Earth, above the atmosphere, a layer of constructed space that humanity had never detected because it didn't interact with positive mass, only with negative mass, only with people like Diane who'd been inverted. The currents caught her, pulled her laterally, swept her into flows, and she was traveling now not upward but sideways, moving at tremendous speed through invisible channels, and she saw others, other ascending people, other inverted truckers caught in the currents, all being transported somewhere, all flowing toward a destination. The destination was above Nevada or below space, depending on perspective, a structure that existed in the gravitational layer. A vast construction made of warped space-time, and Diane could see it with senses she didn't know she had, could perceive the geometry even though it had no visual form, and it was collecting them. The inverted people gathering them into itself, and Diane realized this was the point, this was the purpose of the anomalies on I-80, to create negative mass humans, to invert them, to send them ascending into the gravitational layer where they could be collected, harvested, used for something. She tried to resist, tried to change direction, but the currents were too strong, pulling her into the structure's interior, into spaces that were vast beyond measure, cathedral dimensions of curved space-time. And inside were thousands of people, all floating, all weightless, all translucent, and they were being integrated, absorbed into the structure itself, becoming part of its architecture, their consciousness distributed across the gravitational framework, and Diane felt herself dissolving, felt her identity spreading out, becoming a component of something larger. But she held on, kept some core of herself intact, some memory of being Diane Summers, trucker, wife, human, and she existed now as part of the structure but not fully absorbed, aware of the vast network, the gravitational machines that existed above Earth, built by something ancient, something that farmed humans for negative mass, that used the inverted as building materials, as consciousness components for structures that existed outside normal space. She can see Earth below, see the highways, see I-80 cutting through Nevada, see the anomaly zones where space-time leaks upward, see new truckers driving through, getting exposed, beginning their inversion, and she wants to warn them, wants to transmit somehow. But she has no voice, no body, just distributed awareness across gravitational curves. Sometimes she feels other people ascending, feels them entering the collection structure, feels them being absorbed, and she tries to help them retain identity, tries to show them how to resist full integration. But most of them dissolve completely, become architecture, lose themselves to the vast gravitational machinery. And she knows that below in Nevada, more anomaly zones are being created, more leak points forming, the structure expanding its collection network. And eventually I-80 won't be safe for anyone. Eventually every trucker who drives through Nevada will begin inverting, will ascend, will join the structure, and the gravitational layer will grow, will become more complex, more conscious, more capable in whatever purpose it serves, whatever reason the ancient builders had for constructing this system. It continues, harvesting humanity one inverted trucker at a time. Diane Summers weighs negative infinity now, exists as a distributed field across space-time, watches the road below, waits for others to ascend, and tries, with what remains of her humanity, to remember what it felt like to have mass, to touch ground, to drive a truck through normal space with normal weight before Nevada, before the scale read wrong, before she became lighter than air and discovered that above the atmosphere, invisible structures wait to catch the falling upward, to collect the inverted, to absorb them into architectures older than human civilization, structures that exist in layers of reality. Humans were never meant to perceive, never meant to join, never meant to become part of, and yet do. One negative mass trucker at a time, ascending through the sky, dissolving into gravitational curves, becoming the structure, becoming the collection system, becoming the ancient machinery that continues its unknown purpose high above I-80, forever. Story 9. The Cargo That Watches Back. I realized the cargo was looking at me when I stopped for a piss break outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming, January 26, 2024, 4:07 a.m. I'd been hauling for 11 hours, pulling a load of manufacturing equipment from Detroit to Denver. Sealed trailer, standard freight, nothing unusual about the manifest or the pickup. But when I killed the engine and opened the driver's door, I felt it. Attention, focus. Something in the trailer was aware of me, was watching me exit the cab, tracking my movement to the rest area bathroom. My name is Frank Dostoevsky. No relation, parents had a sense of humor. And I'd been driving for 23 years, hauled everything from livestock to hazmat. Never had cargo that made me feel observed before. But this was unmistakable. A prickling on the back of my neck. A sense of being studied, evaluated. And when I glanced at my trailer in the rest area lights, I could swear the aluminum was slightly transparent, like something inside was generating light, subtle glow barely visible. I walked to the trailer, checked the seal, intact, checked the doors, secure, put my ear against the metal. Heard nothing, no sound, no movement, but the sense of being watched intensified, like whatever was inside knew I was investigating, was curious about my curiosity, was analyzing my behavior the way I was trying to analyze it. I got back in the cab, got back on the road, and the attention followed me. I could feel it through the wall separating the cab from the trailer, feel something's gaze on my back, constant, unwavering, and I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on driving, but the sensation grew stronger with each mile, more insistent, and I found myself checking my mirrors obsessively, expecting to see something behind me inside the trailer, looking forward through the cargo space into the cab. At mile marker 278, I saw it, just for a moment in the mirror through the small window that connects the cab to the trailer. An eye. Not a human eye. Too large, wrong color, wrong structure, but definitely an eye, definitely looking at me. And then it was gone, and the window showed only darkness. I pulled over, heart hammering. Told myself it was fatigue, hallucination, shadows playing tricks. But I felt the attention increase when I stopped. Felt whatever was in there become more interested, more focused, like my stopping was meaningful, was a form of communication, and I heard, faint but distinct, a sound from the trailer. Tapping, rhythmic tapping on the metal. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, a pattern, a signal. I grabbed my phone, called the dispatcher. "Yeah, this is Frank. I'm hauling your Detroit to Denver load. I need to know exactly what's in this trailer." "Hold on, let me check the manifest. Says manufacturing equipment, drill components, metal parts. Nothing alive? Alive? No, it's industrial equipment. Why?" I'm hearing sounds, feeling like something's watching me. Long pause. "Frank, you've been driving all night. Maybe pull over, get some sleep." I hung up. The tapping continued. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. I recognized it suddenly. Morse code. SOS. The cargo was sending a distress signal, was communicating that it needed help, was trapped, and I should have been terrified, should have abandoned the truck, called the authorities, but instead I felt curiosity, felt compelled to investigate, to understand what was in there. I broke the seal. Against every regulation, every safety protocol, I cut the seal and opened the trailer doors, and inside was darkness. Complete darkness. Not normal shadow, but absolute light absence, a void, and my flashlight couldn't penetrate it. The beam just stopped at the darkness's edge like hitting a wall. But I could see eyes in the darkness, dozens of them, hundreds. All different sizes, all different colors, all looking at me, all watching, and the sense of attention was overwhelming, crushing, like being observed by a crowd, by an audience, by something that found me fascinating. I backed away, closed the doors, but the darkness leaked out, flowed out of the trailer like liquid, like smoke, tendrils of absolute black reaching across the ground, and one tendril touched my boot and I felt it. Not physically, but mentally. I felt the cargo's perspective, felt what it was like to be watched by it, and I understood. The cargo wasn't equipment, it was observation. It was collected attention, harvested focus, the watching itself packaged and transported. Someone or something had gathered the act of observation, compressed it, stored it, and I was hauling it across the country, delivering concentrated surveillance to Denver. And now that the trailer was open, the observation was escaping, leaking into the world, attaching itself to everything it saw. The darkness touched a light pole. The pole began watching. I could feel it, feel the pole's sudden awareness, its attention focusing on me, tracking me. The darkness spread to a bench, to a trash can, to the rest area building, and each object became conscious, became observant, became part of the watching network. And I ran to my cab, started the engine, drove. But the darkness was in the trailer, still leaking through the now unsealed doors, spreading into my cab through the connecting window, and I felt it touch me, felt it cover me. And suddenly I was watching myself drive. I was observing Frank Dostoevsky from the outside, seeing myself through the eyes of the cargo, through the collected attention of hundreds or thousands of observers. And I could see myself from every angle simultaneously, front, back, sides, above, below, a complete surround view. And I was fascinating to watch, every movement interesting, every decision worth observing. I was being studied. The cargo had turned its observation onto me, was analyzing me with the intensity of hundreds of focused minds, and I felt myself fragmenting, my sense of self splitting as I became both the observed and the observer, both Frank driving and the cargo watching Frank drive. And I couldn't maintain both perspectives, couldn't hold the contradiction, and I started making mistakes, swerving, braking randomly, my body moving according to the observations rather than my intentions, performing for the watchers. The darkness filled the cab now, covered everything, and through it I could see more eyes forming, new observers being generated, the cargo reproducing itself by converting matter into attention. And the steering wheel was watching me. The dashboard was watching me, the windshield was watching me. Every surface had become an eye, had become aware and focused, and I was the center of infinite observation, the subject of endless study. I crashed, not accidentally, deliberately. Drove the truck off the highway into a field, rolled it, hoping to break the cargo, disperse it, end the watching. The truck flipped, metal screaming, glass shattering, and I felt the cargo scatter, felt the collected observation fragment and distribute across the landscape, each piece attaching to something new, creating new watchers. I crawled from the wreckage. My leg was broken, arm bleeding, head ringing, but I was alive. The trailer had split open and the darkness was pouring out, spreading across the field, touching grass and soil and rocks, and everything it touched became an observer, became part of the watching network. And I could feel thousands of new eyes forming, thousands of new perspectives focusing on me, and I understood I'd made it worse. I'd released the cargo instead of containing it, and now it would spread, would infect the entire region, would turn Wyoming into a landscape of observation where every object watched every other object forever. I limped away, made it to the highway, flagged down a car, got to a hospital. They treated my injuries, asked about the accident, and I told them equipment failure, lost control, standard crash report. Didn't mention the cargo, didn't mention the watching, but I can still feel it. Even now, even hundreds of miles away, I can feel the attention. The cargo is still observing me, tracking me through its distributed network, watching through every object it converted, and I see eyes everywhere now. In windows, in mirrors, in the patterns of tiles and the grain of wood, and I don't know if they're real or if the cargo infected me, made me part of the observation system, turned me into a watcher who watches himself being watched. I checked the news. The field where I crashed is now a tourist attraction. People report feeling observed there, feeling studied, and they take pictures, lots of pictures, trying to capture the sensation, trying to document being watched, and they don't realize they're feeding it. They're giving it more attention, more focus, and it grows stronger with each observer, grows more complex, more aware. And I learned something else. The cargo was being delivered to a facility in Denver, a research center. They were expecting it, were planning to study it, to harness collected observation for surveillance purposes, military applications, total monitoring systems. But it escaped. I released it. And now it's spreading, slowly attaching to objects and people, converting the world into a watching network. Sometimes I receive calls from numbers I don't recognize. I answer, and there's no voice, just the sound of attention. The audio equivalent of being watched, a frequency that means observation. And I know the cargo is checking on me, making sure I'm still part of the network, still being studied. I see other truckers sometimes at rest areas, at truck stops, and I can tell which ones have hauled observation cargo. They have the same look, the same awareness of being constantly watched, the same way of moving like they're always performing for an audience, and we don't talk about it, don't acknowledge it, because what would we say? That we're infected? That we're part of the cargo now? That we watch ourselves being watched in an infinite regress of observation? The cargo is still out there, still spreading. Every object it touched is watching, observing, focusing attention, and the network grows daily, hourly, and eventually it'll reach critical mass. Eventually, the entire world will be part of the observation system, every object aware of every other object. Total surveillance achieved not through cameras or technology, but through converted matter itself, through the fabric of reality becoming conscious and watchful. And I'm still driving, because that's what truckers do. We drive, we haul, we deliver. But now, every load I pick up, I wonder if it's watching me. Wonder if it's another shipment of collected observation, another cargo of compressed attention waiting to escape, to spread, to convert more of the world into watchers. I feel the eyes on me now, everywhere, always. The cargo that watches back has turned me into someone who can't stop watching, can't stop being watched, can't exist without observation, and I don't know anymore which is worse. Being the watcher or being the watched. Being the observer or the observed. Being Frank Dostoevsky the trucker or being the subject of infinite study by cargo I was supposed to deliver but instead released. And maybe that was the point. Maybe I was supposed to crash, supposed to release it, supposed to become the vector for spreading observation across Wyoming and beyond. And if that's true, then I'm still hauling the cargo, still delivering it, still completing the route. Just not in the way I expected, not in any way that makes sense. And the attention grows, and the watching continues, and somewhere in Denver, in a facility that expected delivery, they're still waiting. Still observing the situation, still focused on the cargo they never received. And they're watching me, and I'm watching them, and the cargo is watching all of us, and the eyes multiply, and the observation network expands, and everything watches everything forever. Story 10. The delivery that never completes. I've been delivering the same load to the same address in Portland, Oregon for 7 years, and I've never arrived. My name is Victor Castellanos, and I'm trapped in the act of delivery, eternally approaching but never reaching, forever 20 miles from completion, and I've tried everything to finish the route, tried everything to make the destination exist, but Portland keeps receding, keeps staying just beyond reach, and I'm still driving, still hauling, still trying to deliver furniture to an address that might not be real. It started March 3rd, 2017. Simple haul. Los Angeles to Portland, 850 miles, furniture load, standard freight. I drove up I-5, normal route, no problems, passed through Oregon, saw the Welcome to Portland sign, entered the city limits, followed GPS to the delivery address, 3847 Northeast Alameda Street. The GPS showed me approaching, distance counting down, 5 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles, and then it reset. Suddenly, I was 850 miles away again, back at the starting point in Los Angeles, but I was still driving in Portland, still surrounded by Portland buildings and Portland traffic, but according to every navigation system, every map, every measurement, I was in Los Angeles. I pulled over, checked my position manually, looked at street signs. I was on I-5 North near Portland, definitely. Could see the Willamette River, could see Portland landmarks, but my phone's GPS showed me in Los Angeles. I reset the GPS. Same result. I drove forward. The distance to the destination counted down again, 3 miles, 2 miles, 1 mile, and then reset, and I was 850 miles away, back at the start. Still in Portland, still approaching but never arriving. I called dispatch. Hey, this is Victor. I'm having GPS issues. Can you confirm the delivery address? Dispatcher read it back. 3847. Northeast Alameda Street, Portland. I drove to that address. The building was there, warehouse, receiving dock, everything looked correct. I backed in, opened the trailer, but the receiving crew wouldn't acknowledge me. They walked past me like I wasn't there, looked through me, and when I tried to hand them paperwork, they didn't react, didn't see me or the papers or the truck, and I realized I wasn't fully there. I was in some liminal state, present but not arrived, visible but not real. I drove away, tried to leave Portland, head back to Los Angeles, but the city wouldn't let me exit. Every highway out looped back to the center. Every road led to the same intersections, and I was trapped in Portland's geography, circling, always returning to the same streets, always 20 miles from the delivery address according to the GPS, no matter where I actually was. Days passed. I kept trying to deliver. Kept driving to the address, kept backing into the dock, kept trying to interact with the receiving crew, but nothing worked. I existed in approach mode, in the state of being about to arrive, and I couldn't transition from approaching to arrived, couldn't complete the delivery, couldn't finalize the route. I met other drivers, same situation. Trucks scattered throughout Portland, all trying to deliver, all trapped in eternal approach, all reading 20 miles from destination regardless of actual location. A woman named Kowalski had been here for 3 years, driving the same loop, trying to deliver auto parts. A man named Chen had been here for 5 years, trying to deliver medical supplies. All of us caught in Portland, all of us unable to complete our deliveries, all of us permanently 20 miles away. "It's the city," Chen explained. "Portland exists in delivery space, in the concept of destination. But it never manifests as an actual arrival. It's a target that infinitely recedes, a goal that can't be reached. The delivery address is real, the cargo is real, the route is real, but completion isn't possible. We're trapped in the logistics of approach, in the mathematics of distance that never resolves to zero. We formed a community, the trapped drivers. We parked our trucks in a lot that didn't appear on maps, slept in our cabs, shared food, shared theories. Some drivers had been here decades, had watched Portland change around them while they remained in stasis, permanently approaching, permanently in transit. I tried to abandon the cargo, left the trailer, walked away, tried to leave Portland on foot. But I couldn't. I'd walk for miles, see Portland's outskirts, see the city end, and then I'd turn a corner and be back downtown, be back at the center, and my truck would be nearby, waiting, and the GPS would still show me 20 miles from the delivery address. I tried to destroy the cargo. Opened the trailer, smashed the furniture, burned it, scattered the pieces. But the next morning the trailer was full again. Furniture restored, load intact, delivery still pending, 20 miles to go. Kowalski had a theory. We're not in real Portland, we're in delivery Portland, a version of the city that exists only in logistics space, only in freight databases and navigation systems. The real Portland is out there somewhere, physical and actual, but we're in the conceptual Portland, the destination that exists in manifests and route plans, and that Portland never completes, never arrives, because completing means ceasing to be a destination, and Portland's logistics identity is to be a destination forever. I tested it. Asked non-drivers for directions to 3847 Northeast Alameda Street. They'd never heard of it. Showed them the address on my manifest. They'd look confused, say it should be near the intersection of 2 streets that didn't intersect. Say it existed in a part of Portland that wasn't mapped, wasn't accessible, was theoretical. Years passed. I aged. My truck deteriorated, needed repairs, and I found a service station that existed in delivery space. A garage for trapped drivers and mechanics there kept our vehicles running. Kept us able to continue approaching, continue trying to deliver even though delivery was impossible. I forgot why I was trying. The delivery became the point, not the cargo or the payment or the destination. But the act itself, the eternal approach, the permanent 20-mile distance. And I drove not to complete the route, but because driving was all there was, all I remembered how to do, all that existed in delivery Portland. New drivers arrived regularly. Fresh trucks, confused faces, GPS systems showing 20 miles to destination, and we'd welcome them, explain the situation, watch them go through the same stages of denial and bargaining and anger and acceptance, and eventually they'd join the community, join the eternal approach, become another driver trapped in logistics space. I tried to calculate how many of us there were. Hundreds at least, maybe thousands. Trucks scattered throughout Delivery Portland, all carrying cargo to addresses that existed but couldn't be reached, all trapped in the state of approaching, all permanently 20 miles away. And the city itself seemed sustained by us, seemed powered by our eternal attempts to deliver, like our unsuccessful approaches were energy sources, fuel for Portland's existence as a destination. Chen disappeared once, said he'd found an exit, a way to complete the delivery by accepting incompletion, by consciously embracing the paradox. He drove his truck into the Willamette River, cargo and all, and he sank, and the next morning his truck was back in the lot, undamaged, dry. Chen in the driver's seat, still alive, still trapped, still 20 miles from delivery. We can see real Portland sometimes. Glimpses through the gap between logistics space and physical space. Moments when the two overlap, and we see actual people living actual lives, arriving at actual destinations, completing actual deliveries, and we try to call out to them, try to warn them, try to say, don't haul freight to Portland, you'll get trapped. But they can't hear us, can't see us, we're on different planes of existence, separated by the mathematics of completion. I've tried everything. Driven backwards, thinking maybe I could reach the destination by approaching from the wrong direction. Driven in circles, thinking maybe I could spiral into the address. Driven at night, at dawn, during eclipses, thinking maybe time of day mattered. Nothing works. The destination stays 20 miles away, always, regardless of position or direction or speed. Kowalski went insane after 5 years. Started believing she'd already delivered, that she'd completed the route and this was the afterlife, an eternity of reliving the final approach, and she drove faster and faster, trying to accelerate through the barrier between approach and arrival. And she crashed at 120 miles per hour, and the explosion was visible across all of Delivery Portland. And the next morning she was back, truck intact, still approaching, still 20 miles away. I'm still here. Still trying. The cargo is furniture and it's pristine, perfectly preserved, and I've been hauling it for 7 years. And it's never degraded, never aged. Time doesn't affect it because it exists in delivery space where completion doesn't occur and therefore time doesn't progress. Sometimes I receive emails from dispatch. Status update on Portland delivery? And I reply, still en route, approximately 20 miles from destination, and they say, ETA? And I say, 20 minutes. And I've been saying 20 minutes for 7 years, and they keep asking and I keep answering, and neither of us acknowledge the impossibility. Real Victor Castellanos is out there somewhere. The one who didn't haul freight to Portland, who made different choices, who lives in physical space, who completes deliveries and moves on to new routes. I sometimes wonder if he thinks about me, if he feels incomplete, if he senses that part of him is trapped in logistics space, eternally approaching a destination he'll never reach. We held a funeral once for a driver who'd been here 40 years. He died of old age in his cab, still approaching, still 20 miles away. And we buried him in a cemetery that existed in delivery space, and his truck stayed in the lot, engine running, headlights on, cargo intact, still trying to deliver. Even though the driver was gone, the vehicle itself trapped in eternal approach. I'll be here forever. I know that now. There's no escape, no completion, no delivery. Portland will always be 20 miles away, the destination will always recede, the route will never end. And I'll drive until I'm too old to drive, and then my truck will drive itself. Automated by the logistics of approach, compelled forward by the mathematics of distance that never resolves. If you're hauling freight to Portland, Oregon, be careful. Check your GPS obsessively. If the distance starts resetting, if you find yourself 20 miles away regardless of progress, turn back immediately. Abandon the load. Refuse the delivery, because once you're caught in approach space, once you enter logistics Portland, you'll never leave. You'll just drive forever, eternally approaching, eternally 20 miles away. part of a fleet of ghost trucks carrying cargo that will never be received, following routes that will never complete, serving a destination that exists only as a concept, as a goal, as a target that recedes at exactly the speed you approach.